I'll take volunteers. That would be engineering jokes.
How many engineers? They can't be funny.
Yeah.
How many stormwater board members?
Yeah.
I noticed we had an airline-looking sitting area with TVs on the ceiling. Never noticed that.
Big jet.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder what they're seeing.
Roy said he was coming today, didn't he?
Probably putting on the
We're good, and they reminded us that everybody should use their microphone when they're speaking.
All right, good. Okay, let's go ahead and move. We think Roy is coming, but we'll go ahead and move for an approval of the meeting minutes, if everybody's ready for that.
Do you want to do the notice of appeal?
Before the meeting?
Oh, is it, I don't know what order we usually do it, Penny. Penny will keep you honest.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we did, but given today that we're going to hear a long presentation for fire, I was thinking we'd just wait until after the presentation. Okay, so if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and take a vote on the meeting minutes. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Or I need a motion.
I move we approve the minutes and as presented.
I'll second.
All right, that's just the minutes.
I'll be glad to amend to the decision letters too, if that'll help.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll accept that amendment to my motion.
Second that.
All right, so we've got a vote for the approval of both the meeting minutes and the decision letters. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I will abstain.
Aye. Opposed? None, one abstention. So the next matter on the agenda is a presentation this morning, which is a little bit out of typical order, but we thought it would be appropriate for today's meeting.
Good morning. I'm Tom Palco, Assistant Director of Metro Water Services. I'm over the Stormwater Committee. I'm over the Stormwater Program in Nashville. At the last meeting, we heard that you wanted to hear some different aspects of where the buffers came from, and there were some questions about how granting variances plays in with FEMA. So I'd like to go through a little bit of that with you, if I could. So I'd like to start by just giving you a little bit of history on how the buffers came to be. In 1998 and 1999, there's actually two groups that got together. One group was the Stormwater Task Force. The Stormwater Task Force was primarily looking at what were the needs for stormwater funding and how could we fund it. At that point, we were at Metro Public Works, and stormwater was kind of just funded through general fund money. And so the task force spent about a year talking about the funding aspects of stormwater and how to do that. At the same time, there was a Stormwater Management Program Review Committee, okay, and that committee was charged to conduct an expeditious and comprehensive review of the stormwater management program of the Department of Public Works. Such review will include consideration of water quality, water quantity, cut and fill policy, detention policy, greenways, land conservation, floodplain preservation, and hazard mitigation. So essentially, they were charged with looking at everything we had currently on the books in the stormwater program, currently in the regulations, and say, do we want to move forward with that, and do we want to make any changes? And what they came up at the end of their discussion was a lot of recommendations to the Director of Public Works, most of which became written into the regulations, and one of those was a 50-foot buffer. So then in 2004 and 2005, there was another round of meetings, and another committee was set up. It's called the Stormwater Regulations Review Committee, and they essentially went through the same kind of review of the stormwater program, and they again reaffirmed the benefits of buffers, and they changed the buffers, as I've described there, to be current with what's in our current regulations. They widened the buffer to 75 feet. And what both these committees liked about buffers were that buffers push development away from the stream banks. Okay, they push it away from the stream banks, which helps with hazard mitigation. It helps with the safety of the folks living there. It provides open space just for the sake of open space, provides habitat, and provides an extra layer of water quality protection. it was clear from the beginning that the buffer was not to be used for water quality. It's not that if you're going to develop along a stream, just run the water through the buffer and the buffer does the water quality for you. It was that it was always understood that you would provide water quality on your site, and that the buffer was just an extra added benefit. So when an applicant comes to you and says, hey, as long as I have met the water quality aspects of the site, we don't need the buffers, I think that is a short-sighted argument, because you're not looking at all the different aspects of what a buffer does. Again, pushing development away from the stream and those kind of things. So you also asked about, well, what about FEMA? What about FEMA, and how does this all fit into FEMA considerations, granting variances? So buffers are not part of the minimum requirements of FEMA, but our program does not meet the minimum standards. We exceed the minimum standards. So under our program, we have, there's a thing called the community rating system, where communities are rewarded with lower flood insurance rates if we do things that are above and beyond the minimum standards of FEMA. So our cut and fill policy, our buffers, our 4-foot freeboard requirement. There are people across the country that are very envious of Nashville right now because we have that 4-foot standard. I mean, just think about Houston and how many folks may have had 1 or 2 feet of water in their house. If they would have had a higher standard, there could have been a lot of folks that didn't get any water at all. So that's something that we've always had on our books, and so the community rating system gives us that break. So in order for people are also confused about, well, what do I have to do to get flood insurance? The only thing in order for you to be able to get flood insurance, the community in which you live has to be in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program. And so it's very important for us that we keep in good standing. So the actions by the committee, well, to point out too, when FEMA looks at the community, they're not looking at Tom Palco and Roger Lindsay and Kimberly. They're not looking at the staff at Metro Water Services or staff. They're looking at the community. This board is part of the community. So your actions that you take are essentially the same as me taking an action. So I can't have a set of regulations over here that that exceed the minimum standards, and then have you, if you grant a bunch of variances, then FEMA may come in and say, well, are you enforcing your higher standards? Do you really have those higher standards? I can't hide behind the committee and say, hey, I've got them in the regulations, the committee did that. So they look at you as a committee as part of the community, and your actions matter, and your actions are subject to review and audit by FEMA. And FEMA does that periodically. Periodically, they will come to town and they will do an audit of our program. They'll do an audit of our community rating system program to see if we should still be getting that break on our insurance. So that is something to consider, is that what you do matters. Another thing that matters is that if the community is in good standing, then we have the availability to get mitigation funds after disaster. May 2010, we were able to buy 261 homes and remove them from the floodplain because we've got mitigation funds from FEMA. If we're not in good standing with FEMA, we don't get those funds. So on Pennington Bend, Miami, we took out 25 houses that were along the river there. So currently we have multiple other projects going on to continue that buyout program. So again, the bottom line is, like I said, is that what you do matters. What you do is part of the community, and we don't need to do anything that's going to jeopardize our good standing in the National Flood Insurance Program. I can't come up here and tell you how many variances is too many, how many variances is enough. Again, that's something that's between if FEMA comes to town and does an audit, that's something they would consider. So with that, I'm done with my part, and I think Roger's going to come up and talk about some of the other questions that you asked about. Yeah, Jeff, you got questions?
In regard to the cost of our flood insurance program and the benefit we get by going above expectations to keep those costs down. Another variable that you didn't touch on that I'd love your input on is rates. Insurance rates have gone up in recent years fairly dramatically, it's my understanding, because of increased risk of flooding and storm events that have been occurring around the country, and potentially because of not having enough capital in the program to cover these increasing risks of unusual weather events. So would you say that because of these rising costs that it's becoming more important that we be careful with what kinds of policies what kind of policy decisions we make in regard to keeping the cost down as low as we can, and because of those rising costs.
Yeah, to touch on what you said, from the inception of the National Flood Insurance Program in 1968, all the older structures have been subsidized. Those flood insurance rates were not based on elevation. They're just based on the fact that they were built before we knew any better. So in our case, anything built before 1982, those flood insurance rates were subsidized with typically a lower premium. So starting with 2012, with the reauthorization of the National Flood Insurance Program, they started moving towards, we need to run this insurance program like any other insurance program and charge rates based on your risk. If you have more risk, you should pay higher. So in some cases, a $400 policy may go to $4,000 a year because they're 2 feet below or 3 feet below as opposed to 2 feet above. So yes, the rates have dramatically changed. And where we are in the community rating system is we currently get a 10% break. Everybody in Nashville automatically gets a 10% break on their flood insurance because we've earned enough points in the program with some of the things we do to get that 10% break. So it's vitally important. I mean, the latest standard is that 2% of the properties across the nation make up for 40% of the flood losses that are paid out every year. So we as a community, if we can take care of those 2% of the properties and get those off the books and mitigate those one way or another, then that keeps money in the program. But yeah, it's a real struggle right now, especially with what's happening in Houston and wherever else, and with the one coming next is FEMA is their funds are being depleted, and they need more people paying into the program, paying actuarial rates because they've got so much need out there. So I'd say yes to what you're.
Thank you.
Tom, I have a question too. You said it's a point system, so based on the points that we've earned based on our program, we get our citizens get 10% off. So the 4-foot extra elevation makes a lot of sense. I'd imagine there are a number of points assigned to that. But is it like my car insurance where I get a $25 deduction for safe driver? Or I mean, is it that clear as to why you're getting points? Or the process to certify what we do is a cumbersome process through FEMA. We're working on our annual recertification that we have to do every October. But essentially, our higher standards used to get us about one class. You start with a class 10, which is no benefit, no break, and then a 9, 8. So it's 500 points for each class, and our higher regulatory standards has pretty much almost gotten us that first 5% break just because of the higher standards. And so it's again, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to show FEMA that yes, we have this, and yes, we are enforcing that, and here's how we're checking all the boxes to make sure that we're doing it the way they want it done. But it is a point system, and I'm not sure if the policyholder, if they have knowledge of why they're getting the break, the answer would be that no. I don't think they know. That just automatically is cheaper. The reason I ask, is there any way to assign or know if we're getting a lot of credit for the buffer system itself, and whether or not the buffer system, because like I said, the 4-foot freeboard, that's very obvious why that would be, because that's the reason that's lowering their risk. But the 75-foot and the 50-foot buffer system, is there anything that we can look at to say, yeah, we're getting a reduction because of that right now? We're working right now to get points in a lot of different areas that we haven't historically gotten points before, and the buffers is one that we're working on. Open space, creation of open space, so through the buyout process where we take houses down and create open space, there's points available there. But it's very incremental and very small, but it all adds up. So the zone equals open space, and therefore that's why it would end up being giving us some more points. Is that the relation? There's points for. It's all about reducing your risks, and if we're pushing development away from the high risk areas and removing structures from the high risk area and creating an open space where we used to have high risk area, those are the things that we're looking for. Are there any other questions? Then I give you Roger Lindsay.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Roger Lindsay, and I'm a stormwater and floodplain manager with the Metro Water Services Stormwater Department. And I want to talk just briefly about the modeling process and the new maps that we have in place in Nashville that have just taken effect this past April. It's the first time in some 17 years that we're working now with new, up-to-date, upgraded flood insurance rate maps. We worked on those maps going back to the 2010 flood. We actually had some of the basins ready to release the week before the flood occurred in May of 2010. And so we told FEMA to back away, let us reassess, let us consider the impact of that flood, especially as it relates to the way we model those individual creek basins. And so we did, and the end effect is that 7 years later, we finally rolled out new maps. And the process of mapping for flood insurance purposes and also for development purposes is that we now use a much more sophisticated system than we used in 2001 when the last maps were released. And we use a LiDAR system that is a system of capturing, I believe it's infrared photography or imagery to create a much more accurate topographic map of the system. So our maps now are significantly more accurate than they were in 2001. And in addition to that, we have over 300 miles of streams that are mapped now that were never mapped in the past. And to a great extent, that it addresses creek basins where we used to map a certain distance and then the mapping just stopped. The people beyond that point of mapping had the mistaken assumption that they weren't in the floodplain, even though they had a creek in their backyard. And now we've mapped miles, in some cases miles beyond those old points. So we have significantly better mapping than we did in the past. But a great point that I want to make to you is that all of this mapping is based on what FEMA defines as a special flood hazard area. That's the 100-year floodplain, or the 1% chance storm floodplain, if you will. So there seems to always be confusion about what a 100-year storm is or a 500-year storm is. There's a tendency in the industry to say, let's don't call it that anymore. Let's call it a 1% chance storm or a 0.2% chance storm, or God forbid, a 0.1% chance storm, and which is essentially what we experienced in May of 2010. The fact is that we model based on a 100-year event, a 1% chance event, and if you're outside that, just outside that limit, you are essentially at no lesser level of risk than your next door neighbor who may be inside that special flood hazard area. And the fact is that there was kind of a notion after the 2010 flood that we would never see a flood like that again in our lifetime. And I want to kind of dispel that notion, because in 2013, we had the equivalent of about a 500-year event in the Gibson Creek Basin and Cooper Creek Basin up in Madison, where some 100 houses were impacted by a rain event that dropped about 8 inches of rain in 6 hours. This past Thursday night, I had the pleasure of spending the entire night in the Emergency Operations Center, where we watched roughly 10 inches of rainfall in the Whites Creek Basin, which is one of our larger drainage basins that extends from the Cumberland River northward through Bordeaux and all the way up to beyond Fontanelle. Whites Creek flows through the middle of the Fontanelle entertainment venue on up to Whites Creek High School. And we had 10 inches of rain in that basin on Thursday night, which equates to about a 200 to a 500-year event. The May 2010 flood, where we had about 13 to 14 inches of rain over most of the city, is somewhere around a 1,000-year event. So my point is, when we look at this, and I saw an article just yesterday that concluded that the city of Houston, Texas, has had a 500-year event in each, counting this year, of each of the last 3 years. And there were a dozen billion-dollar disasters last year, including floods in places like Ellicott City, Maryland, and White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, Hurricane Matthew. These things happen on a more and more frequent basis. And the fact that we had yet another very significant event in our city on Thursday night goes to the fact that we're going to regulate to the standards that are defined in our stormwater management manual. We think it extremely important that we respect the buffers and because we have people move to town that didn't see the flood in 2010. I never imagined that I could have 4 feet of water in my house. Those kinds of things are comments, those are comments that we hear on somewhat of a routine basis. And we're getting calls right now from people that declined buyouts after 2010 that are saying, I'm ready to be bought out now. I've got texts from last night that says, I'm ready to be bought out now. So it goes to the fact that we want to provide as high a level of protection as we can to these people. And that's kind of because we do that. As Tom mentioned, we're being discussed nationally. The city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is in the process of buying everything they can buy in their floodplains. There are cities around the country that are being proactive about providing flood protection, and it's kind of borne out by the fact that these extreme events are just happening over and over again, more and more frequently. And I think another article yesterday that says that FEMA will run out of money by tomorrow. And so it's a serious issue. Kimberly has got a list of all the decision letters that were written on a number of the projects for which variances were considered or variances were granted in the floodway buffers. And so I'll let Kimberly take it from here.
Good morning. I'm Kimberly Hayes with Metro Water Development Services, and I oversee all single-family processes. I'm here before you today we were tasked for data, to provide you with data for single-family lots that have requested variances in the floodway buffer, solely in those areas. And so I have compiled a packet that I have before you today, and that will highlight some of the cases that I will be discussing. After each lot or site is the actual application that was submitted by the applicant or submitted by the engineer on behalf of the applicant. Also the minutes per the discussion of that case. So with the minutes, you can see who was the board members at the time. You can see who was absent at the time, and you can see the full discussion. What I will highlight today is just some key points from the minutes. It's all fully there for you to see. And I do want, those who are in the audience, none of this is coming from me. This is solely things I will be highlighting that is from the minutes. Okay. One of the other things I wanted to note, I believe one of the things that was shared by UDOT at the last meeting, I know we were trying to highlight particular sites that were on the Cumberland River, looking at Pennington being in the Miami area. Much to my surprise, I noted we really didn't have many from 2011 to 2017 where we had either granted or not granted. So we had one project in 2011, which is on the board right now, 2301 Pennington Bend, which was granted. And then we had the 3 cases on Miami Avenue that we deliberated for several months where there was a motion failed and not granted. So that left a huge gap in the years. So we have, put in other projects that may not necessarily be on the Cumberland River. It includes also those along Sugar Tree Creek, Cooper Creek. So I just wanted to highlight that. So the first case is 2301 Pennington, 2011, 0004, which was granted on February 3rd, 2011, and then there was a rehearing on May 5th, 2011.
Kimberly, why was there a rehearing? Why was there a rehearing?
I will get to that in just a moment.
So you're going to cover the details.
I will cover that, yeah. It won't be fully, but it'll cover the details, but the full details are in the packet that I presented to you. Okay, so the variance request was for disturbance of the Cumberland floodway buffer area to construct a house and garage with 2,595 square feet of enclosed area. The statement of hardship, applicant has multiple spinal disorders, including severe spinal stenosis, needs residence with both bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen, some level located adjacent to the applicant's daughter, and they were also seeking to have a star lift located in the garage. It was stated that there was no reason or no feasible alternative plan existed. It was also noted that the applicant purchased the lot before the May 2010 flood and could not afford to purchase another lot. So, and I don't know, this may not be as clear, I just don't have my glasses on, I can't see that well. One or the other, I'm sure it's the glasses. So the request was for, the main house was mainly in the Zone 1 floodway buffer, and there was a 20-foot setback. Thank you, who's doing that for me? Did someone do that? Oh, thank you, Rebecca. The plan indicates that there was a 20-foot setback from the road. There was no encroachment of the floodway, but very close. And so some of the discussion that was noted is that the applicant, Ms. Sherry Lawler, submitted a petition from neighbors stating support of the variance request. The former councilman, Phil Claiborne, spoke on behalf of the request, and he stated that Ms. Lawler and her husband had been longtime residents on Pennington Bend Road. He also spoke of physical conditions that Ms. Lawler had, which made her difficult for her to negotiate the different levels of the existing home. He also stated that Ms. Lawler wanted to build a one-story home on the lot next door to her daughter. So after discussion, Roy Dale made a motion to approve the variance based on the plan of record. The motion was seconded by Kevin Gangaware, and the motion was approved by Mr. Tom Allen, Ms. Elaine Bright, Mr. Roy Dale, and Mr. Gangaware. Mr. Lance Wagner voted against the motion. The reasons for the approval were, this is a unique lot, the structure will be out of the floodway, the structure will be above the floodplain, the request is for disturbance of the floodway buffer only, and water quality offset is being provided for the buffer disturbance. So the case was granted, but a month after that occurred, Tom Palco was contacted by the council member on behalf of the owner, Sherry Lawler, stating that there was a, not a misrepresentation, but the setback for the house was not represented correctly. So instead of 20 feet from the road, it was supposed to be 30 feet from the road. And so they were allowed to come back for a rehearing, which was held on May 5th, 2011. All right. Okay, and at that meeting, Councilman Phil Claiborne submitted a petition from 16 of the neighbors supporting the variance, or the rehearing of the variance. Again, Mr. Roy Dale made a motion to approve the variance for revisions of the plan of record. And the reason for the approval, it was as stated above, this is a unique lot. The structure would be out of the floodway. The structure will be above the floodplain. The request is for disturbance of the buffer only, and water quality offset is being provided for the buffer disturbance. And the revised plan is not much different than the original plan. Does that answer your question, Slade? All righty. So the next case is 2828 Sugar Tree. This is case number 2012-00019, which was granted on December 6, 2012. This is a unique case. This was an existing house that was damaged by fire. The variance request was to change the encroachment of the footprint of the home along the, oh my goodness, someone wrote this, of the 75-foot floodway buffer of Sugar Tree Creek to construct a portion of a single-family residence and driveway. One of the issues to be noted with this is that although the house had been damaged by fire, they were able to go back and build within the existing footprint without having to obtain a variance. That is within our regulations that one can do that. And that was a decision that was decided by the committee after the 2010 flood. but he said the house did not meet building code standards as it stood at that time, and he was changing the footprint ever so slightly that would encroach the Zone 1 floodway buffer, so he had to come before the committee. The statement of hardship as presented is that the old home at the address was built back in the early 1950s, remodeled in 2007, and on May 29, 2012, burned to agree that the structure had to be completely demolished. It was stated by the applicant, as we considered the rebuilding of the structure, we quickly realized that there were problems with the footprint of the old structure. It encroached the 50-foot front setback as well as an encroaching on the 75-foot no-disturb buffer in the rear. We have attempted to redesign a new structure in the old footprint with no success. The footprint of the old structure was incompatible with current building codes as well as the current look and value of the neighborhood. So after discussion, it was Ms. Elaine Bright who made a motion to approve the variance request as presented with our standard conditions. And the reasons for the approval were that the same owner of the home the same owner of the home that burned is trying to rebuild. The owner has been conscientious to remove some impervious areas, and the structure does not protrude negligibly into the buffer further than the original footprint. Any questions on that one? All right. The next case is 6649 Riverview Drive. This is case number 2014-00010, granted on July 10, 2014. The variance request was disturbance and encroachment of the 75-foot floodway buffer of the Cumberland River for construction of a single-family residence. One of the things that was noted is that based on the front setback, the building lies within the Zone 2 buffer, and the minimal disturbance of the Zone 1 buffer will be required during construction. However, no impervious surfaces will be constructed in the Zone 1 buffer. Keep putting my mic off. One of the requests for them, too, was that there was going to be placement of 73 cubic yards of uncompensated fill. It was Mr. Slade Sevier who made a motion to approve the variance request, and it was seconded by Doug Galbraith. The motion was approved by Ms. Elaine Bright, Mr. Roy Dale, Mr. Doug Galbraith, Mr. Sevier, Mr. Monty Turner, and Mr. Lance Wagner. The next case is 2826.
Can you pause for just a second?
Sure.
Okay. Were there any pre-existing structures on that site before this?
This was a new structure. This was not an existing structure.
This had never been developed?
Never been developed.
Okay. And can you go back over the conditions? For example, I can't see either. So there's no intrusion of the Zone 1. Is that true?
No, there was no intrusion. As you can see on the very left corner, it was right at the Zone 1 demarcation line there. Okay. It was stated in the request that there may be a slight disturbance of that during the construction, but there would be no footprint within that area.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay. The next case is 2826 Sugar Tree, which is case number 2016-00019, which was granted September 1st, 2016. This is an existing structure that remains. This is currently under construction. They are elevating the construction to meet compliance, but they were seeking to add an addition to the house that encroached the Zone 2 Zone 2 buffer. They are eliminating a lot of the existing impervious area by removing like a detached carport, some of the driveway that was also housed in the floodway itself. So that is being removed. And they chose to do a green infrastructure control practice on the site as part of their mitigation.
Okay. Is that all the details on that one?
No.
Okay, good. 'Cause I want to pause on that one,
That's
too.
right, and I do want to apologize to those in the audience, for my pauses. It's just kind of going through the data, I kind of have highlighted things, so, but you have a question, Dot?
No, I like your pauses because we need to understand this.
Okay. The appeal request from the applicant on this particular site was that the proposed building that is located within the buffer will be constructed on piers and will be open below. We will disturb approximately 1,075 square foot of buffer to install these improvements. We will also be removing 1,053 square feet of existing impervious area from the buffer. The owner is proposing to eliminate an existing carport structure and asphalt paving that is much closer to the stream than the proposed building addition. It also goes on to state that in addition to removing impervious surface as part of the proposed mitigation, we intend to construct a new rain garden on the west side of the home and direct the runoff to the existing home in the rain garden. It states in the discussion that Mr. Kevin Gangaware gave an overview of the project and the variance request. He stated that per the zoning code, the house is not allowed to be any closer to the street than it already is, and is closer to the street than the average of the 4 houses. After deliberating, Mr. Slade Sevier made a motion to approve, and it was seconded by Mr. Roy Dale. Mr. Roy Dale, Ms. Deborah Grimes, Ms. Anna Maddox, Mr. Slade Sevier, and Mr. Lance Wagner voted in favor of the motion.
Okay, is that all the details on this one? Okay, so just to be clear, this one did encroach on the Zone 1?
That is the zone, hold on. Yes, the addition is in the Zone 1.
Okay. And this is an addition to an existing building?
It's an existing house that was elevated.
Okay.
This is currently under construction on Sugar Tree.
Okay.
So the next 3 cases I'll just discuss jointly because that's how they came before the committee. This would include 2655 Miami Avenue, 2659 Miami Avenue, and 2661 Miami Avenue. You all went through several months of hearing this. I'm sure you haven't forgotten.
We have a new member, though, since then, so it
Yes.
might be helpful.
All right, so the request was for permission to construct a single-family residence on each lot, fully in the Zone 1 floodway buffer for the Cumberland River. The houses included porch, steps, decks on the ends of the houses. There was also a request for permission to cantilever a portion of the house or decks within the floodway. There was further explanation that the entire parcel is within the floodway or the Zone 1 stream buffer for the Cumberland River. The property owner has already gone to the Board of Zoning Appeals and had the front setback reduced to 10 feet to keep necessary encroachment to a minimum. The existing ground is presently above the 100-year flood elevation based on the June 1st, 2016 preliminary firn map. So all three cases were previously deferred on December 1st, 2016. They came back before the committee on January 5th, 2017, where a motion failed to approve the variance request. The appellant submitted written requests for rehearings, which were granted by the committee on March 2nd, 2017, with the rehearings being held on April 6, 2017. The original variance request for each case is as the following, and pretty much identical to what I just shared. Disturbance of the 50-foot Zone 1 of the floodway buffer of the Cumberland River for construction of a single-family residence fully in the Zone 1, and they had decks or cantilevered structures that were in the floodway. Now, there is a lot of discussion in the minutes that I have provided you that would probably take the rest of this day to go through.
Remembered it took up much of that.
Yes.
Kimberly, what was the stated hardship?
Let me see. I'm sorry, I thought I had provided that. Well, let's see. Each case, it just clearly states that the decision of the Director of Water Services that no construction can occur on this lot without approval of a variance from the Stormwater Committee. That's what he has noted. I do remember, or it's also stated in the minutes, that the engineer tried to, I guess, state that the properties were purchased prior to the buffers going into effect, but staff clarified that the buffers went into effect in 1999 prior to Mr. Smith's purchase of the properties in 2004. Ms. Teresa Costonis with Metro Legal also clarified the position about cantilevering over the floodway, which was significant because of the change of Title 15 passed following the 2010 flood, stating that no new structure shall be constructed within the floodway. Mr. Don Galbraith stated that there is a precedent by this administration and previous administrations to swap Metro-owned properties, and I think that's when you had requested more information from staff, and it was deferred the first time.
Yep. For the benefit of our new board member, my focus was also on what Metro's land use policy for those types of sites might be, so we could not just think parcel by parcel, but think about land use intentions for that particular area of the county.
But all three cases, yes, sir.
And this, the entire parcel is within the floodway or the Zone 1 stream buffer.
I read
So
that.
there's no,
Yeah.
as far as hardship,
And I read that.
it's not a buildable pad.
Yeah. Roger was just highlighting that it stated that the entire parcel is within the floodway or the Zone 1 stream buffer for the Cumberland River. So some of those, it wasn't a buildable pad unless they sought a variance. And so with all three cases, the motion failed to approve, therefore it was not granted.
The vote was tied on all of those, correct?
Yes.
It was only 6 people here. It was 3-3. Couldn't go either way.
All right, the next case is 1434 Artie Avenue, which is case number 2017-00019, which was granted August 3rd, 2017. This is also an existing structure, and they were seeking to add an addition to the existing house, which is in the Zone 2 floodway buffer. The variance request was for disturbance and encroachment of the 75-foot floodway buffer of Cooper Creek for construction of a new rear addition to an existing single-family residence, along with rear deck, stairs, fences, and AC pad. The explanation provided in the application is that this variance is good for the variance is for good and sufficient cause given the new FEMA maps just now indicating floodway on the property. Currently, the property would not be allowed to add onto the back, and there is no sufficient space towards the front setback. Granting this variance will not result in increased flood heights because no field is being added. The building will be raised to 4 feet above the base flood elevation, therefore creating less risk for the property than currently exists. We see this addition and renovation project as a benefit to the neighborhood and does not conflict with other ordinances since neither a height nor setback variance is being requested. Roger, do you want to highlight anything along Cooper Creek? At one time, it was not studied, but now we have a full study.
Sure, that's one of the segments. That's one of the segments that is now modeled that was never modeled and mapped in the past. I think it was shown as an unstudied A zone in parts of Cooper Creek, but now there's detailed modeling showing floodplain and floodway on more significant reaches of Cooper Creek.
So what would that look like on this particular lot now, Roger? Can we put
It's
lines?
the new maps.
This is based on the new maps.
It's based on the new maps.
This was an appeal that was granted in August of this last month, I guess.
So can you, I can't even read the narrative on there. Can you tell me what those lines mean?
So that's the floodway line where Rebecca has the cursor,
Right
and it's
there.
in your packet.
Right.
Okay.
That's the floodway line.
Okay.
And the Zone 1 line is right there
Okay.
at 50
Right.
feet.
All right.
And so you had a slight corner in the rear that was in the Zone 1.
And where's the 100-year floodplain line? I thought that was the floodway. Okay, I see. Okay. Okay, so
You have it? You see it?
yeah, I see it now. Yeah. Okay. Just not,
trees, there may be the floodplain.
well, the floodway has to be inside of the 100-year. It can't be outside of it, right?
It does.
Does it have it on there?
This is one of the disadvantages of the screens. It's hard for us to, we can't read any of these plans.
can't blow it up. Unless Rebecca can zoom in over there.
I can't even figure out where the floodplain
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took snippets from, a plan to kind of put in the presentation, so I'm not sure if that's.
I mean, the fact that the floodway is at the property fence indicates that the 100-year floodplain has to be outside of that line towards the house. Floodways where the fastest moving water exists. So the slower ponded water will be outside of that, generally, unless it's a really tight valley or something.
Don?
Yes, sir.
I think I read that the 100 years 440, which looks like it would cut across the center of the residence.
Okay. And that makes sense because it's an older structure. And it has just recently been modeled and mapped. Modeled and mopped. Okay.
So I believe the applicant had purchased the property not knowing of the map change.
Yeah.
But when anyone would come in to even with due diligence, we would always tell them we were holding to the most restrictive. And so the new maps were the most restrictive at the time.
So this.
But the maps are fully, adopted now.
So this brings up another point for me that I don't want to dwell too long on now, but it's of interest to me. Metro's general policy for setbacks puts a lot of pressure on placement of homes near drainage ways, because streets generally are in the highest, driest areas. Engineers do a good job of keeping streets dry, and because you don't want cars going underwater that often. And I've often wondered why we have such intensive setbacks in Davidson County. Even in situations where it looks like having houses closer to the street would be more advantageous, particularly as we get more dense in Davidson County. So at some point down the road, maybe there's an opportunity to have a conversation between us and Metro Planning, just to have a discussion about maybe revisiting that or talking that through, because I think it would help the development community have more developable area. Of course, in many cases, it may just be too late because the parcels that we're developing now are set back the way they are because there are houses already built on those historic setbacks. So you can't put one in front of it and expect it to look nice or to look even. But in areas where we can address this, I think it's an opportunity to take some pressure off of these drainage patterns and off of people who need to come here and ask for variances. So I think that's all needs to be said.
Okay, in regard to this case, it was noted in the minutes that Mr. Lance Wagner recused himself, stating that he is a founding member of the Friends of Cooper Creek Watershed. Mr. Roy Dale moved and Ms. Anna Maddox seconded the motion to elect Mr. Dodd Gabbert as acting vice chairman that particular day. So after discussion, Ms. Anna Maddox made a motion to approve the plan as is with standard conditions. Mr. Roy Dale seconded the motion. And Mr. Dale and Ms. Maddox voted in favor of the motion, and Mr. Galbraith voted against the motion. So the last case presented is 3846 Cross Creek Road, which is case number 2017-00019, which was granted on August 3rd, 2017. Now, this particular case, they had obtained a variance in 2015. One of the conditions of the variance says that the variance expires after a year unless you pull a building permit or a grading permit. The applicant failed to do so, so the variance expired, and they came to try to proceed with the existing case, but the maps had changed, increasing the floodway further onto the property than what was previously granted. So they had to come back before the committee. And so this was an existing house that was demolished, and they're building back a new house, also decreasing the impervious area. There was a lot of driveway in the rear that encroached the floodway and the Zone 1 floodway buffer. All of that has been removed. They've somewhat started. They have demolished the house. They haven't really put in footers or anything yet, but that should be coming soon. So the variance request was for disturbance of the 75-foot floodway buffer of Sugar Tree Creek for removal of existing driveway from the Zone 1, removal of existing residence, driveway, and related items from Zone 2, and construction encroachment of new residence and driveway in Zone 2. The explanation in the application was this lot is an existing lot that was created years before any floodplain regulations, and 94% of the site is within the 100-year floodplain, and 47% of the site is in the stream buffers. When the proposed building setbacks are applied to the property, 97% of the buildable area is within the stream buffer. None of the proposed grading will occur within the floodway of Sugar Tree Creek. Without the proposed variances, it will be impossible to replace the existing house, which is below the 100-year flood elevation. The proposed construction will result in 1,244 square feet reduction in the encroachment in the stream buffers and a 315 square foot reduction in the impervious cover on the site. So after discussion, Mr. Slade Sevier made a motion to approve as submitted, and that was seconded by Mr. Roy Dale. And Mr. Dale and Ms. Deborah Grimes, Ms. Anna Maddox, Mr. Sevier, and Ms. Carrie Stokes voted in favor of the motion. Mr. Di Galbraith voted against the motion, and the motion carried. Those are all the cases I have before you today. Anything, any questions?
Kimberly,
Yes.
over here. Is this the one where they put the 25-foot buffer from the floodway do not disturb?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So many of the variances we had seen in the past, they kind of give us a 10-foot no-mow area. They chose to give us a 25-foot no-mow area.
So of all the cases that were presented, as I recall, the one that was disapproved, those buildings were 100% in the Zone 1 buffer, is that correct?
Yeah, the ones on Miami, the three on
Right.
Miami?
Right.
Yes, and
So-
encroachment into the floodway for the cantilevering of the dam.
So all the others were approved. Were any of those buildings 100% in the floodway, of all the others that were approved?
Not 100%. The one at 2301 Pennington Bend was a large percentage
Okay.
of it was.
I mean, that's just a distinguishing difference that I see in what you presented.
Sorry, Roy. Look at the first one that they went over. That's the one that you want to compare it to.
Okay. All right.
And I was going to take a similar approach that Mr. Dale just took, and my additional caveat would be that the only time that we approved encroachments in the Zone 1 was when it was either a former structure on the site or it was an addition.
I don't
Yes.
believe that's true on that first
Yeah, I
one.
don't know, on the first one. On the first one,
With the exception of the first one because of the hardship, because of the health hardship. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you explain that then? I don't understand the health hardship. I mean,
you don't understand it
yeah, I
as
don't
a
understand what
hardship?
that would have had to do, because they still built it, they had to built it above the floodplain.
That's what was presented. I don't know, Terry, I know we don't consider finances as a hardship. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think the
Could you
hardship was
elaborate
that
on that,
you couldn't
Terry?
develop the property because the entire property was within the buffer. That was the hardship of the property.
Yes.
I thought they just pointed, didn't they live on an adjacent lot or?
Yeah, what the health thing was that she wanted to live next door to her daughter. That's not a hardship of the property, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that does not meet the definition of hardship as applied by this board to a variance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Unless the committee has any more questions, I want to just thank Metro Water for going through that exercise. It's very helpful for us. And I mean, I know it's a particular case that drove it this time, but perhaps over so many years, this would be a good exercise to go through again, just to remind ourselves why we have what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish here. So thank you very much.
Extremely professionally prepared.
Yes, it was. And it takes time, and it's extra time you had to spend, so we understand that. With that, I guess let's begin to hear our first matter, which is 2319 Pennington Bend Road. If the applicant wants to come up and the secretary could read into the record the standard blah.
I'm going to read into record the opening statement. If you're not satisfied with a decision made by the Stormwater Management Committee, you may appeal the decision by filing a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the committee's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied.
With that, the applicant, you've got the mic.
Good morning. Again, Jason Yost with Ingram Civil.
Actually, I had to take a step back. I skipped staff, trying to get moving. Staff needs to read the standard appeal. I apologize, Kimberly.
That's all right. First case on the agenda is 2017-00011, 2319 Pennington Bend Road, parcel number 06209005300. The inspector is Kimberly Hayes. This is on the Council District 15, Councilman Jeff Syracuse. The applicant's request case was previously deferred on August 3rd, 2017. Request is to allow the following: disturbance and encroachment of the 75-foot flowway buffer, 50-foot Zone 1 and 25-foot Zone 2 of the Cumberland River for construction of a single-family residence on piers with concrete carport and entry stairs underneath, driveway, rooftop AC unit, installation of erosion prevention and sediment control measures, and removal of an existing shed within the floodway. The 100-year base flood elevation equals 420.2. Also requesting continuous mowing and maintenance of the buffer. The appellant is Kenneth and Notch Keisinger. The representative is Mr. Jason Yost. Comment, Stormwater staff. Metro Water Services staff does not support structures in the Zone 1 buffer. Based on the submitted design plan, it is assumed that the proposed structure has no deck off the rear and there will be no mowing beyond the buffer signage. We just wanted to make sure there's clarity provided on that. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, the first site is zone R15, deferred to Stormwater for review. Greenways, request the applicant provide a greenways conservation easement paralleling the Cumberland River. Public comment submitted by mail.
Terry Costonis wants to make a
And Ms. Terry Costonis of Metro Legal wants to make a comment.
This is relevant to this particular variance request, but it's sort of more generally relevant as well. Just to complement the presentation that you heard earlier this morning, Mr. Balthrop had asked me to prepare some remarks for you as well, just in terms of putting some of the prior precedent that you just heard in the context of the considerations that you are tasked with focusing on in making a variance determination. So I looked at the various sources of authority about that. The Metro Code says relatively little about it. The Metro Code says that when you grant a variance or consider granting a variance, you should specify the manner in which such variance shall be made, the conditions upon which it is to be made, and the reasons for it. What goes into it in more detail is your internal operating rules and regulations, which does specify it pretty specifically, but what's interesting about the language here, internal operating rules and regulations, which are in Appendix F of the Stormwater Management Manual, is that the language it uses is taken almost directly from the Code of Federal Regulations. And both of those sources have 4 criteria. 1, that there be good and sufficient cause. 2, that there be no increase in flood heights. 3, that there be an exceptional hardship. CFR and your regs both don't just say hardship, they say exceptional hardship. And 4, that be the minimum necessary to afford relief. Then, if you look a little bit in context of what is meant by some of these concepts, I found a FEMA bulletin that had what I thought was sort of a good discussion of some of these issues. And so, what FEMA has in mind, at least when, they task a board like this with making variance determinations. And so the language I found in this bulletin says, a variance request by an applicant is based on good and sufficient causes, one that deals solely with the unique site-specific physical characteristics of the property, subdivision lot, or land parcel in question. Physical conditions are uniquely inherent to the land or property and will not change or be significantly altered over time. A good and sufficient cause for a variance occurs when a parcel of land possesses physical characteristics so unusual that complying with regulations would create an exceptional hardship related to the property, the surrounding property owners, or the community in general. In addition, the unusual physical characteristics must be unique to that property and not be shared by adjacent parcels or be typical of other lots in the community. A rendering of good and sufficient cause should never be based on the design character of the planned construction or substantial improvements to the structure, the personal difficulties of the owner or inhabitants, or local provisions that regulate standards other than health and public safety standards. The variance should not be based on the convenience that it would afford the applicant. Inconvenience, aesthetic considerations, physical handicaps, personal preferences, the disapproval of one's neighbors or homeowners associations restrictions do not count as good and sufficient causes. In addition, the financial hardship of the property owner is never a good and sufficient cause for granting a variance. So I thought that discussion was interesting. And then, as you can tell, it focuses very much on the uniqueness of the property. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the standard on appeal, like what kind of how your decision would be looked at from above, I guess, and when you would be vulnerable to being overturned. So you would be vulnerable to being overturned if your decision is arbitrary and capricious. Some of you have probably heard that standard before. And case law also suggests that you must have more than a scintilla of evidence for your decisions. And in general, to make a good record for appeal, you want to carefully articulate the reasons for your decisions, which y'all have been very good about historically. And the arbitrary and capricious standard, I think that the precedent that we've heard discussed today, that might be where that would seem to come in and be relevant. And I think it is arguable that, if you had 2 cases where absolutely all other things were equal and you made one decision in one case and another decision in another, then that would be arbitrary and capricious. Especially if you couldn't articulate a rationale for it. But another thing, The other way to look at that, though, is that all other things are not ever equal in two separate cases. And you really do have to make your decision in a case based on the evidence and the facts before you in that particular case, as applied in the context of the legal framework that I've just outlined for you. So I would say it's better to focus on that rather than what's happened in past cases, as long as you do articulate the reasons for your decision and the way that legal framework does apply to the facts and evidence that's before you about this particular case. It is okay, many of you have significant expertise that is relevant to the decisions that you make, and it is okay case law suggests that it is okay to some degree to bring that to bear in your decision-making as board members. However, you shouldn't substitute that for the facts and evidence presented before you in an individual case that you are making a decision on. So that's all, but just wanted to give you all that context as well.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Two questions I had. Two questions I had on that. One was, what was the source of the long definition on uniqueness that you went through?
So it's just a FEMA bulletin. So it's some guidance.
So all of that was the FEMA bulletin?
That long quote that I read to you?
The long quote?
Yeah.
And then, so the four things.
I think it is actually I have read a lot of cases in that area too, and I think it is fairly consistent with a lot of the case law that I have read on those issues as well. But that is kind of, in terms of the administration of the National Flood Insurance Program and kind of what they're looking at from that context, that's kind of that's the guidance that they're hoping that you all will follow.
The four that were mentioned, I failed to write one of them down. One was no increase in floodplain. Another was exceptional hardship, minimum necessary. What was the second?
Good and sufficient cause, no increase in flood heights, exceptional hardship, and minimum necessary to afford relief.
Good
That's
and
the order
sufficient
the CFR has them in. Our order is actually minimum necessary to afford relief first, and then the other three. But our internal rules and regulations and the CFR is pretty much word for word.
Oh, so that's Metro too.
Yes, it's this board's own internal operating rules and regulations, which are incorporated within the Stormwater Management Manual. But I'm sure it's obviously derived from the federal CFR guidance.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And I think we were on the same line. I was trying to get the four characteristics, but is it possible for you to send us that link from FEMA? I think it'll be beneficial for us as we go forward to have it at least in front of us, because I know you talked about unusual characteristics unique to that property. So those things, at least for me, I think that would be helpful. Is it possible if we could have a link to that article?
Sure.
Thank you.
So it looks like we're done on staff and legal. Am I safe to hand it to the applicant now?
Sorry.
All right. Floor is yours.
All right, good morning. Jason Yost, Ingram Civil with the owners, Kenneth and Sinach. Come before you for a variance for their proposed structure on the lot that does encroach on the zone 1 and 2 buffers. We're just requesting a variance to that so that we can construct that home. And I think that it's been outlined this morning what we're proposing, and so I'm going to turn it over to those that would like to speak and support and object, and then maybe rebut those comments at the end.
Apologize. So you're done with your open presentation?
Yeah, I'll just leave it to. Sorry, I have some comments, but I'll leave it to the end if that's okay with you.
Fine. Yeah, we'll go. Was it an approval first? Those in support first?
Yeah.
Which I want to get back to at the end, but our standard online for our procedure is a little different than what we do. So now we'll open up the mic to those that support approval of the project. And please remember, when you come up, please state your full name and your address so that it can go into the record. Would anybody like to speak in approval, support of the project?
Yes, my name is Adam Epstein. I live at 3704 Hobbs Road in Nashville. The folks have been through a lot to try to get this approved. They didn't know when they moved from Wisconsin what they were dealing with when they got here. I think, like we've done at 2301 Pennington Bend, it's sort of the same situation, but these guys have raised the building up so high that the flood impact and the impact to the buffer is minimal, to say the least, because it's on stilts. It would be great to see neighbors move here, like we've had 100 people a day moving to Nashville, be welcomed with open arms, that they can, see and build a dream house that they've always wanted on this property. I hope you guys could see fit to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Epstein. Anybody else like to speak in support of the project or the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to people who would like to speak against approval of the motion. And remember, please, to state your name and your address or organization before you speak. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Travis Lawler, 2315 Pennington Bend. I spoke last time, so I don't want to repeat myself, but Mr. Galbraith, I just wanted you to know that they have a large front setback variance they were given. They're still in the buffer. Again, this parcel's, the hardship is not unique to this parcel. There are like 43 parcels on Pennington Bend and Miami that share very similar hardships. And then to the question that came up last time we were here of what's changed over the years in terms of like granting variances. I think staff mentioned the big flood and smaller floods and floods being more frequent. The regulations have obviously changed with the new buffers and how the new maps being drawn. But one thing that they didn't mention is the Nashville real estate market has changed. The older homes that are on Pennington Bend, like my home, is about a 1,700 square foot home. It's on a 150-foot parcel. But Pennington Bend is divided up into 50 feet parcels all the way along the bend. So I'm on three lots. And with the pressure on the real estate market now, people are wanting to build on every 50-foot lot on the bend. They have a 50-foot lot. Mr. Epstein's lots are 50 feet. And he's, they're building every 50 feet. So if we allow that, you're going to end up with much greater density than before the flood. And one other thing, I'm not 100% sure on this, but the question of it being on stilts, my understanding is that's still considered an impervious area over the floodway buffer. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak against approval of the motion?
Hello. My name is Richard Lawler. I'm the president of the Pennington Bend Neighbors Association. I've been living on Pennington Bend for 45 years. We're the ones that built the house at what was then 2301 Pennington Bend, because my wife has problems with her back. That was the reason, and at that time it seemed to be sufficient. I feel very sympathetic for these people because we've loved living on Pennington Bend all these years, and I know they'd like to move there. But if this committee allows a house on a 50-foot lot on Pennington Bend or Miami or any of the other areas that are located in the floodplain, everything on Pennington Bend and Miami is in the floodplain. And then after that, it drops off to the floodway buffer and then the floodway. The idea of putting pilings in the actual floodway to 25 foot is not a good one, and I've got some pictures here to show you why, because yesterday my neighbor called me, the one on the south side of my house. This project would be 4 lots up on the north side. He called me because the land drops off in 2 stages. First there's a drop off, and then there's the second drop off, and that's the actual river bank. The first drop-off is within, it's basically the 25-foot floodway. And I've got pictures showing that his land dropped 2 feet all along that first drop-off. And if you put pilings in that area, which they are trying to do, they're going to end up with a house that falls in the river. And I can show you this if you could put this on the screen. It's the new folder. Well, they're just JPEG pictures that's in the folder called New Folder.
It's not recognizing the
All right. Well, that's the case. And if someone's got a regular computer, you want to look at it, I've got pictures on that thumb drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Good morning, everybody. Jeff Syracuse, 15th District. I won't reiterate what I said here last time, but new information, and I know you all are not the BZA, but at the BZA committee for the other case that if they do get a variance would then come to you, I was able to get a 2-meeting variance because I do now have a committee meeting on September 21st to discuss a potential voluntary buyout program for these undeveloped lots. So I'd like these the folks that these 43 properties basically to have an opportunity to have that community meeting before they move forward here with variance requests. So I don't know if it's possible to suggest or to request another 1-meeting deferral for this case so that we could have that community meeting. Otherwise, I'm just going to, as I said last time, just hold the line and be consistent with the position that I do not think that it's appropriate that we develop in the floodway buffer. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? With that, then, I would simply state that based on what the councilman just said, make sure you understand what he's saying. He's saying that within the next month, within this month, there's going to be a meeting to discuss a buyout program for your property. Depending on how that program goes, there could be some difference in the value of your property based on a vote that we take today. That's why you would perhaps want to consider deferring if you're allowed to do that. They are allowed to defer again. Is that correct?
Hang on. Let me get that.
But I want you guys to make an informed decision on that so that you understand what he was saying there.
Hang on. The rules speak to that, I think. It says, at the conclusion of all the evidence in all cases heard at the hearing this session, the committee shall discuss the cases and render decisions in executive sessions on that date or defer decisions for no longer than 30 days thereafter. So since you heard evidence today.
So did we defer this last time, or was this a voluntary deferral?
We deferred. We voted and
Okay.
deferred it. That's why I was wondering if there's a difference. Are they allowed to voluntarily do it?
Yeah, can they just withdraw it as an applicant?
They could withdraw, but
I don't know if they want to withdraw.
The question is, if they withdraw it, then they might have to submit a new application.
Exactly.
So you're asking more whether they can
defer.
Yeah, there is some. Let me see.
Cost money.
No, that's about rehearings. I mean, that's the only guidance that your internal operating rules and regulations have on deferrals. I mean, I believe you can defer a decision. You can do it at the request of the applicant, as long as it's passed by a majority of the membership. If they I think it probably does have to be your decision, even if they request it. I mean, it is before you here today, so you're basically sort of amending your agenda to not hear it today, but to hear it at the next meeting.
I think the applicant said that, are you wanting to rebut what was discussed? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Can we go ahead and allow him to do that?
All right, I was just asking about the deferral. So I'm just going to touch on some bases that was presented in the presentation and give some feedback on that. So buffers were put in place post-2010 flood for the safety of the citizens of Metro, and understandably so. I believe Metro is exceeding those FEMA requirements by more freeboard, and we're actually increasing that freeboard by 6 more feet. So by pushing the building closer to the road via the setback that we went through due process by Metro to obtain that setback, we are trying to minimize the disturbance, and by elevating, we are also trying to minimize the disturbance as well as the risk of the home flooding. With the 4 feet of freeboard that Metro is exceeding FEMA regulations, we're adding 6 feet, so that's 10 feet above what FEMA recognizes as what's required as far as the BFE. So we're only increasing risk mitigation, for lack of a better word, by both setback and finished floor elevation. The variance process with Stormwater Management Committee is put in place by Metro. So, as you said, particular sites with hardships can come before you and possibly construct buildings on lots that would not be developable if the variance were not put in place. So we've went through BZA and asked for a setback, granted that setback through due process, and now come to you through due process, through the variance process. I understand that there's other properties on Pennington Bend that have similar hardships, but we're not discussing those today. We're discussing this property. So the backup that was presented is appreciated and kind of gives you some idea of why properties were passed and why they were not. But all the hardships were the same because of the property location and the buffer on the river. They came because the building where it would be is not developable on that property because of the setbacks. So we're not asking to increase the footprint square footage that we would be allowed to build if we were placing the structure on the setbacks as they are now. So it would be a 24 by 40 foot footprint that we could build, and that's what we're proposing. So we're not exceeding any allowable footprint in the buffer if we were to be allowed to build without the setback, setback variance granted, and just placing the structure on the setbacks as they are. There's a net cut on the property, although it is minimal, so we're not adding any fill to the floodway or the buffers. The footprint is what it is. There's no exterior decking. There's no increased decking that would, in the floodway, in the buffers themselves, There will be the AC pads on the roof, so we're trying to minimize any impervious area or obstructions to the floodway as much as we can. So we appreciate everyone's support or objection to our property, but again, this is a case alone by itself, and we just would appreciate your approval for this request. And that's all I have.
I have a question of staff, most likely.
Roy, do you mind if I interject just a moment?
Sure, go ahead, sorry.
Just for the record, there was another person in favor of the building. This is Miss Mary O'Neill of 2219 Pennington Bend Road. She wrote via email stating that she was in favor of the building.
I appreciate all the time that staff spent putting together this presentation and understanding more about what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to proceed. But I have a question of legal or staff. Is there a definition or legal intent of a floodway buffer? Can someone answer that question? There's got to be. I mean, in my opinion, I think a floodway buffer was really established for water quality. It wasn't established to create open space. It wasn't established to do anything but create water quality. That's my understanding of it. Is that correct or not?
Tom talked to that. Tom talked to that a little bit from the very beginning.
Okay, so I missed out on that? There you go.
So there you go.
See?
So
That's something,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. All right.
But
I can read this, Tom.
It's a very good question, though.
But that's something I think that I need to understand, because many times we are making these determinations, and I'm thinking, I've always felt like this was a water quality board. That's what I've always been told. And so I didn't think that the intent of providing these buffers was necessary to create open space. It's to provide water quality. That's my understanding.
It was. If you look at the second bullet I have there where it says Stormwater Management Program Review Committee, that was in 98 and 99. At that point, it was not required under our MPDS permit to have buffers along streams. Those buffers are now part of our water quality requirement. But when this group got together, stormwater was still a function of Public Works, and we were underfunded at Public Works, and we really had no ability to do stormwater projects. We had no ability to do much of anything, and so there's some discussion in what are we going to do with stormwater. Is there really a need to spend more money on stormwater? How big is the problem? How can we solve this problem? So it was a very multifaceted approach to look at everything. So we had the one group that looked at the funding aspect. They said we can either fund stormwater better at Public Works, we can create a whole new organization, or we can move it to water services. Those decisions came a little later, but this committee, what they looked at everything that was in the Stormwater Management Manual and said, how do we want to progress as a community? What's important to us as a community? And they basically looked at, like I say, they looked at detention policy, the cut and fill. They looked at all that and said, we like the cut and fill policy. It seems to be working. We like the freeboard requirement. That seems to be working. And they looked at buffers. They looked at land conservation, floodway preservation, hazard mitigation. And through all those discussions, we had other cities. We showed examples of what other cities were doing, and they picked what they liked and said, we like buffers for multiple reasons. One reason is, again, it pushes development away from the streams, so we don't have to worry about things falling off in the stream, because stream banks have a tendency to erode at times. There was a discussion about open space just for the sake of open space. And then there's also a discussion of, if we do water quality on the site, then the buffer gives an added protection of water quality. So it was all the above. And what I stated earlier is that just stating that, hey, I've done water quality on the site, these committees envisioned that you would provide water quality independent of the buffer. You're required to do water quality separately. The buffer was just an added layer of protection, an added benefit, and again, it was multi-purpose buffer.
And Michael Hunt is out, I think, in Montana today, but he did a bit of research on the original committee as well. and discovered that the reason they set the buffer from the floodway was also for protection of humans and property, because many buffers are measured from top of bank, and on our smaller conveyances, those buffers are measured from top of bank. But the reason they went ahead and set it from the floodway line on these larger conveyances was to also protect people and property.
And that's one thing that I failed to mention earlier when I'm talking about FEMA requirements. Again, as far as the elevation go, there's been a lot of discussion as, the building is elevated. That still doesn't resolve all the safety issues of that location. As you know, there was in 2010, one of the houses caught on fire, and luckily a guy in a jet ski came down and saved her and her dog. There's still potential for flood losses through FEMA. You can still, even if you elevate, you should still get a flood insurance policy, because there's still things that are going to be susceptible to flood damage. So even though you've elevated, you still can file claims against flood insurance. You can still, again, it's still a very dangerous place to live. This is not a case. Pennington Bend and Miami, it's not like you can just walk across the street and you're out of harm's way. You've got to go a long way to get to high ground. And if you look on aerial photographs of the May 2010 flood, there are numerous cars parked up and down the road. So yes, the river is controlled by a dam, and you do have some time to get out, but people don't, and they didn't. And so there's still a lot of damage, a lot of loss, even though it relatively was a slow rising event. So that's all I've got to say.
I can speak to it a little bit from a legal perspective, too, I guess. The buffer is a creation of the Stormwater Management Manual regulations. It is not in the Metro Code per se. It is, discussed at some length in the manual, in the regulations. Also in your internal operating rules and regulations, there's a lot more discussion than just what I quoted to you previously about considerations on granting a variance. There's a list of 1A through K of different factors, many of which relate to danger to life and property and so forth. And L speaks specifically to the buffer. I'm not sure it's any much more helpful than what you'd previously heard, but it says modifications to the buffer area shall be the minimum necessary to achieve a reasonable buildable area as decided by the committee. Other requirements for building in the floodway shall still apply. Where possible, an area equal to the encroached area or equivalent stormwater management practices shall be established elsewhere on the lot or parcel in a way to maximize or provide equivalent stormwater quality enhancement and protection. Variances for reducing the no disturbance buffer require written recommendation, positive or negative, from the Greenways Commission, and redevelopment as defined in Appendix B of this volume within intensely developed areas may be exempt from all or a portion of the requirements of this subsection, provided feasible alternatives or BMPs to benefit stormwater quality are applied. So, there are many things that you can take into consideration in granting a variance in general, and then there's a little bit more specific guidance for granting a modification to the buffer in particular.
Okay. Tom, would you mind coming back up just for one more second? And then just to clarify, this rip-wrapping aspect, is that going to be proposed as part of this development as well?
No, that's existing.
That's existing. Okay,
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay, I want to get that off the table, because now I can ask Tom this question. So, Tom, is it fair to say that FEMA is looking at a variety of attributes in a community that normally we would not consider as functional or purpose-driven infrastructure, like open space and riparian buffers and regulatory policy? They're looking at this sort of recipe of attributes as a value statement for a community, and as in the case of physical attributes like open space and buffers, as a type of infrastructure in a community. Is that a fair statement?
I'm an engineer, so engineers are a lot of times focused on, I can fix this, I can build there, I can engineer this, but FEMA has made a real effort in current years to talk about the natural and beneficial functions of floodplains. I mean, floodplains are great just because they're floodplains, and when people call me and say, hey, my backyard flooded Friday night or Thursday night last week, well, their backyard is 100-year floodplain. I would expect the floodplain to flood. So FEMA has done a real good job in recent years of, again, promoting the natural and beneficial functions of floodplains, and that from a variety of that you could speak on for longer than I can on how beneficial they are. And so again, my job is to keep us in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program, because it's so vitally important that we do that. The committee actions have not been audited yet by FEMA, but they certainly could through one of our community assistance visits or through the CRS program where we get the break on the flood insurance. They could show up tomorrow and say, we want to see your case and talk about this. When Roger was talking about being at the OEM last Thursday night, he was not alone. Other of us were there as well. And here's the way it goes. There's West Hamilton Road. When the creek started rising, we can watch the creeks rise. And we saw White's Creek went from 5 feet to 18 feet in about 2 hours. And so police officers were available. We sent police officers down to drive the street, knock on doors at about 9 o'clock in the evening where the water was behind the houses, knocked on the doors, and the folks said, hey, we're fine, we're going to stay, we're fine. 2 hours later, well, it's about 1 o'clock when the next wave came through, the water rose 4 more feet, putting water across the road, putting water in the houses and in the folks in the cars that live there. And we got calls from some of those folks saying, can you come get me? So that's what we're faced with. And I'm trying to build a community that is more resilient. And one thing that was brutally obvious at being at OEM during Thursday night was that we were seeing some of our green spaces flood. Blackman Road and 7 Mile Creek, it flooded again. It floods every time we have a big rain. It floods. So the urban farm got flooded. Nobody's house got flooded. Other areas where we have created open space, those open spaces flooded. Nolensville Road across from the fairgrounds, there used to be a mobile home park there. The telephone poles lining that moved. We would have had water flowing underneath 20 mobile homes if we had not taken them out. So we're, again, trying to, as we go through the process of managing development properly according to our regs, and then taking the mitigation money that we can and take an effort to try to make it a better place.
Okay, so I thank you. I appreciate it. So, by nature of these processes, we have to come to a point where we start saying what we think as individual board members, so I'll get that started. But,
Do you mind if I say something before? Is that?
Mr. Chairman, it's up to you.
I think we ought to let her say something.
I do too. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sinach Kaisinger. I live at 1510 Kahala Avenue in Nashville. And on a side note, it's my birthday, so if this could be the best or worst birthday ever. I'm just kidding. I actually wanted to address the optics of this decision. I know that there was an opposer last time that talked about, just alluded to the frivolousness of this decision, and it may have been frivolous. I certainly can see why that's the case, but I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that it wasn't like a complete disregard. We actually looked through, we did the research that we could. I even recall asking, if there were any issues with building on this lot, which wasn't, disclosed to us. This is the first waterfront property that we've ever bought, and I think with new experiences, you always trust people who have more experience than you. And I have a healthcare lawyer on my team, for example, and when there's a compliance issue, I go to him first to ask for his advice. And so I think in this case, we trusted our realtor, although he was newer, he was backed by a team with a lot of experience. We also trusted the seller's realtor, who had 20-plus years of experience. We trusted the seller's word, which, I think trusting people who have more experience than us, I think that's a reasonable thing to have done. But I think when you're in a situation like this and it's a difficult situation, you've lost a lot of money, the only thing you can do is try to make the best decisions moving forward. That's why we've hired Jason. We've hired all the appropriate engineers to assess and make sure that we don't impact the land in any negative way, or as minimally as possible. We also, this was a 2-year process for us. We've a lot of time, a lot of money has been spent to make sure that we're doing the right thing here, and I hope that's obvious to you that we'll continue to do the right thing. If you choose to approve this, and I think that's really it. I just wanted to make sure that you had more context about this decision, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and I completely understand all that. And matter of fact, I can empathize with it because I've lost significant amounts of money in real estate before. Fortunately, I had later real estate deals that help to balance that account and make up for it. I hope however this works out, that you all find a positive path to recover your value and your interest. That's certainly not my intent or anybody's intent, I don't think, to make that more difficult. So that being said, I was thinking about this case last week as well during all the rainfall. And I live in Green Hills, live about 2 minutes from Lipscomb's campus. I'm not going to say where these places occurred, but I know of buildings that flooded that have never flooded before last week in Davidson County, in Green Hills. I'm very concerned with what we're seeing in Houston. On the way here today, I heard a radio report, and I confirmed it on my phone. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, a very fiscally conservative individual, is going to double the aid that the House passed this week to support Houston. So it's going from about $7-something billion to another $7.9 billion. So it's going to be roughly $15 billion of federal taxpayer money to rebuild infrastructure that is already there, to haul away material that got washed away and put it in landfills with landfill space that is funded and paid for by taxpayers, by local taxpayers. There's a cost to these kinds of decisions to the taxpayer, a significant cost. Ideally, if we could trust the lines that are currently drawn to stay the same, the extensive precautions that have been made to safeguard this home and to make this lot developable would be a lot more secure, and we'd have a lot more confidence in them. And many of those lines have been exceeded with the excess capacity that you all have added to your proposal. My main concern is that development of this Zone 1 buffer, which we rarely approve for development, is going to remove open space. And even though we do evaluate these cases on a case-by-case basis, procedurally, from a policy perspective, there's a cumulative math that comes into play when FEMA evaluates how well this community is doing in limiting its risk. and every one that we approve creates incentive for the next one to be approved. So why am I saying this? I'm not saying this to make y'all feel bad or to try to sway the vote. I'm saying this because this is a big deal. This is a big decision. This is a very similar moment to what we had with our previous Pennington Bend cases, the 3 that we tied on. Maybe a 7th board member that day would have made it definitive. I can't support it as it's proposed, as an individual board member. So.
Okay. This is a real struggle. I feel like this committee is sort of put in this position by a lack of policy within Metro to a certain extent. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to protect the residents of the county. We monitor the storms that are occurring. We knock on people's doors. Yet we don't have a policy in place to buy properties that could ultimately qualify to be constructed on. And that seems like a real failure to a certain extent. And due to the fact we haven't done that, we're faced with people that have legitimate reasons to request variances, which I think you do. You have a hardship, in my opinion. I always felt like that we were more water quality than anything else, and I guess I need to rethink about all that. And so I'm going to think about safety for a second. I think there was some discussion about building a home on piers in the floodplain. But if you had been some other location in the floodplain, outside of the buffer in the floodplain, you'd be able to build that house. I don't think there'd be anything that would prevent you from doing that. So the fact that you're in the floodplain, you could be in the floodplain somewhere else and still build a house elevated. So I have to take that in consideration. As far as the structural integrity is concerned, we can make a condition that you provide a letter from a structural engineer or geotechnical engineer. So I think that would resolve or maybe answer that concern as well. And so I'm going to go back to what the attorney said before and go down the 4 reasons why you should grant a variance. And I don't know if I'm articulate enough to understand what good and sufficient cause is. But to me, you have a lot. It's a legal lot. You may pay minimal taxes on the lot, but it's a buildable lot. It's listed as Metro. It's got a map and parcel number. And so I think that the fact that you want to build there, I think that's a good and sufficient cause. You want to build on a lot that you purchased. You're not going to increase the flood heights, which is the second thing that we discussed. I don't see anything here that says that what you're going to do is actually going to raise the flood elevation. Exceptional hardship, that sort of confused me a little bit when it said that your lot cannot have be any different from any adjacent lot. But if any adjacent lot qualifies as a hardship too, then I think you have to think about that. So this lot, based upon its proximity, based upon its elevation, based upon the fact that it's covered, 100% covered by floodway and floodway buffer, zone 1 and zone 2, I think that constitutes a rationale to request a variance. As far as minimally developing this to the lesser extent possible, not trying to overdevelop it, the fact that you went before the Board of Zoning Appeals and you sought a variance in order to set the building further and you're not using the entire Zone 1 buffer was a strong attempt, in my eyes, that you've tried to do the minimal possible in order to get a reasonable building envelope. And so, based upon all those reasons, I would support a variance. I'm not going to make a motion, however, at this point. I want to hear other committee members and see what they have to say. I think that would possibly affect my decision. But as it stands, I feel that's the way I feel. Now, I know that the council member may be able to go along and look at other lots in the future, and I think that's great, and I hope he can do that. I think that's warranted. I'd love to see Metro come in and buy all these properties, and maybe even if you get a variance today or not a variance today, hopefully you would be included in that. But the fact that you've paid a fee, you've gone through a process, you have legitimate reason to ask for a variance, I think that this committee should move on this today.
All right, go ahead and go. I think all of the reasons and justifications for not allowing development of this property are very, very valid. I don't think there's any question about that. From anywhere from the health and safety to the open space to it's just nicer for the community. I mean, they're all valid reasons. The issue is cost and the fact that Metro Council should be making that decision, not us. They were elected to make those decisions after the 2010 floods. There was back and forth over and over. In fact, they had to go back and revise the ordinances over and over to decide exactly what they were or weren't going to allow. And through that process, they again stated that they were not going to allow, development in the floodway, but they were going to allow it in the floodplain. And that's the decision they came down to. Our elected officials came to that decision. And it seems to me that with all good intention, again, these are valid reasons for not developing this property, we're trying to get more than what Metro Council decided was proper. Because, again, there are costs associated with not allowing people. I mean, if you had your withers, we'd make half of Nashville a park. And we'd buy up everybody's houses. And that would be great for me if that wasn't my house, I guess. But the point is that we have to look at it as to what this board is asked to do. And this board is asked to consider variances, in this case, of a buffer. And we have to look at the purpose of the buffer, and we have to look at, how we've done that in the past. Certainly look at the four elements, lack of a better word, that Roy's already gone through. There's no increase in the floodplain. Good sufficient cause. The hardship, the adjacent property issue, I think, is kind of difficult to understand. But at the same time, you couldn't. If the case was that it's not a hardship, if the adjacent property is the same thing, then almost all of the ones we've heard in the past aren't hardships either. I mean, almost always you have the floodway goes into the adjacent parcels. So that there has to be some explanation for that uniqueness and qualification. I think Metro would be great if Metro purchased your property, but I don't think that this board should be taking it without Metro making that decision. And so that's why I would not. I would support a motion to approve this variance.
Certainly, I'm from Wisconsin too. Would love to build on a river. Certainly, I can understand why your interest in that property. I, however, do not see that there's an exceptional hardship here. One clearly stated that financial is not a hardship. I don't think it's a unique property. I think that's the biggest issue. There's multiple parcels up and down that street, as well as Miami, that are very similar. So the question of this, the uniqueness of this doesn't exist. I also believe that these three things that the buffer is supposed to do is something that we as a committee need to support. And so by allowing to build completely in a Zone 1 buffer, the ones we've approved in the past have been, for the most part, just little slivers. This is a complete structure. So I would not support a motion to approve. And I would also say that as a realtor, it's not our job to tell you if you can build or not build on a lot. And I would suggest, I know that you signed a disclaimer to that effect. And also, if your realtor did tell you that, then you have recourse against that realtor because they don't have any information or authority to give that kind of information. But I would not support the variance.
I'd like to ask a question to help me understand our chair's comments about Metro policy for council. As an attorney, I really trust his perspective on this, and I think maybe this clarification will help us both. What is the difference between a Metro council resolution to establish essentially law in Davidson County versus a stream buffer regulation, which represents some type of metro law. Are both of those equally leveled in terms of their legal power? And if there is any difference, is that difference based upon the fact that the buffer ordinance is more directly, quote, appealable through the means of a variance versus a Metro Council resolution that would be only appealable to the council, correct?
So I think in essence, your question is a simple one, and I can give you the simple answer, but then there's a little bit more complicated answer also too. But the simple answer is that council enacts laws by ordinance for the most part. Under certain circumstances, they can do resolutions, but any addition to the Metropolitan Code is going to be made by ordinance. Any ordinance enacted by council has equal dignity with the Metropolitan Code, but that which is codified is just more publicly available and searchable, and everybody's on notice of it, regardless of an ordinance as well. But the code is kind of taken pretty seriously. It's a big deal to do an ordinance that makes an amendment to the text of the code. And so, so that absolutely has the force of law. And regulations do also, but the code itself delegates to an administrative decision-making process the ability to promulgate rules. In the stormwater context, that's in Chapter 1564 of the Metro Code, and that authority is granted to the Director of Water Services with the approval of the mayor. So the regulations that are contained in the Stormwater Management Manual were developed through that process. And I think Rebecca can speak to this. They go through a very complicated process where they seek much input from the community and from various different constituencies before they really make a change to those regulations. And I think it's not actually required to be vetted with this committee, but it may be. Go ahead.
It doesn't have to be vetted through this committee, but it does have to go through the change management process where we put it on public notice and the development community and other stakeholders have a chance to weigh in.
So that is a fairly involved process before those regulations are changed, and they are approved by the mayor as well as just by the department. If anything in the regulations were to conflict with anything in the code, then the code would prevail. So, the ability to make regulations kind of ends where there's some kind of limit imposed by the code itself. So, as far as I know, there's nothing in the code that limits the ability to make regulations about buffers. So I don't think that conflict exists there. So I would say that the buffer requirement is, a validly enacted regulation.
And that's the part that I get about Mr. Slade's comment that, there's a difference in sort of explicit behavior where the council explicitly acts and then versus choosing not to intervene with a delegated authority to a metro agency like Metro Water.
Yeah. Here's maybe the more complicated part. I think it's certainly because of the administrative way that the regulations are adopted, that you all can grant variances from the application of the regulations, I think is kind of an easier answer. But that the code technically says that you can grant variances from the provisions of the code itself. We've had some internal debate about whether, in fact, that is kind of a non-delegable on the part of the council. So we've not encouraged y'all to try to do that. So that's maybe a little bit more complicated.
just to close this out, then it sounds like that there's a possibility, if we chose, that we could grant a variance for a building in a floodway, a structure.
I really think that, again, you get into that area where, it's an explicit part of the code that says you can't do that, then kind of conflicts with the regulations, and I think that the code-specific provisions would prevail.
Then that
So
goes
I
back
think
to my
no.
original understanding. You have to go back to council, so, okay.
I really, I'm sort of a team player. I always have been. And so I want to impose on the other committee members to more or less maybe talk about what their thoughts are. Now, this is an important decision. I think that this is probably one of the most important considerations that we've had in a long time, because maybe we understand things better. We understand the parameters of what we're doing even better than we ever have. And so I don't want to try to influence other members. I'd really sort of like to hear what they have to say. You don't have to, but I'd love to hear that. And I appreciate Deborah and Slade. I mean, I think that's what I'd like to know, because I'm probably going to go along with whatever the majority of the people feel like. And so, maybe if you guys would sound in, it would be helpful to me.
Yeah.
Real quick, just to touch on Todd's comment, that's exactly the point I think I was trying to make, is that this board has the ability to give exceptions and variances to the to the buffer, but not to something as important as whether you can build a house in or not the floodplain. To me, that's a big distinction between the power and quote-unquote policy type decisions we make. Thanks.
Well, I'll weigh in from my standpoint, because I think what's kind of giving me pause is the four, I guess, characteristics. And I think Deborah mentioned the unusual characteristics unique to that property. And as I'm going down and I'm looking at, we have a couple of more, more cases here, and another one on Pennington Bay. What's so unique about this property than what, the other properties adjacent? And that's not what I haven't heard anything that distinguishes it, that gives reason to grant that variance. So, and that may be something that I missed in conversation, but at this moment, I like to have checklists. I want that's done. Yes, we have that done. We have that. But that uniqueness is what's kind of giving me pause at the moment.
Well, and I'll add in, based, as a newer member, but based on my current understanding of the variance process, our charge, and what we're responsible for doing, I'm really struggling with what is that exceptional hardship. I don't see that in this case.
I'm struggling with the uniqueness as well with the surrounding properties. I do feel like you have an extreme hardship. Your lot is completely encumbered by almost all Zone 1 floodway and just a portion of the Zone 2. And I really appreciate the effort you've made to move it closer to the road and get it out. But I think it's just too much. The lot is too small and probably really shouldn't be built on.
I'm not ready to make a motion, but somebody should be, and I should be. But I do think it's important that we thoroughly vet our reasons for this. I've heard two different perceptions of hardships, and I'm struggling with hardship too. Let me clarify that for myself, and if it helps others, that's fine. From what I heard in the definition of hardship earlier, I'm going to go ahead and just make a statement. It sounds like it's not a hardship. It's not a hardship to have a regulatory overlay over your property. That is policy. The hardship comes in when there are very unique attributes associated with that site that policy could not consider as a application of that policy. So this is clearly a Zone 1 buffer. It's clearly in the floodplain. It's clearly in a frequently flooded location. It's clearly meets all the expectations that FEMA, what am I thinking of? Irma? I'm thinking of Irma, I think, that FEMA would be looking for in terms of community attributes to lower risk. Am I missing something?
I think what you're saying is a correct characterization. I will say that exactly what an exceptional hardship or hardship is, it is a tough one to pin down. I can't give you any definitive legal authority on that. The language I was reading to you earlier is from a FEMA bulletin. You know, it is guidance. It is not binding on anyone. It is what they think. That's relevant to us because of the concerns about the NFIP program that Tom was describing to y'all earlier. I have also looked at case law on what is a hardship, and it dovetails fairly well with that description. But there are outlier cases that say other things. There's very little case law out there on a hardship variant in a variance context in the stormwater context. Most of your case law out there is going to be more of like a Board of Zoning Appeals because they have a hardship finding criteria also. And so most of your case law is in that context. Just to put, you know, the guidance that I am giving you in context for you, there's not like a bright line rule of law about what this is. I'm just trying to summarize for you kind of the best legal guidance that I've come across.
I guess the only difference I see is that the hardship that's been placed on the property is the fact that it's a regulation. The zone 1 and zone 2 buffers are regulations. They're not ordinances, they're regulations. And I don't know if that makes a difference or not. Today I sort of felt like that, you know, Dot and I always seem to be articulating on opposite sides, and it's really not about us. And I think that maybe, if given the opportunity, I'd like for maybe the engineer to talk about all the things he's heard about and see if there's anything he can do to answer those concerns, and I think we should vote. Is that okay?
Well, I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
First, I'd say on the hardship issue, if we follow the uniqueness, something that's not the same on just not, again, almost everything we've done in the past, that can't be how you interpret that, because on almost every one of the lots variances we've granted, the lot next to it has that same issue. So I mean, that definition doesn't work in this context. I'm sure it does work in many contexts, especially with zoning issues. In this context, it doesn't work. My understanding of a hardship and the way I've seen this committee interpret hardship is that if the regulation creates a situation where they can't reasonably use the property as they would have typically used it, that's the hardship. And whether or not you can, and in the residential context, we've all looked at, can they build the house outside of zone 2? And we go, well, they can't. Okay, well, what do they have to minimally do in order to build on the property? And that's the way we've approached every one of these in the residential context, from my perspective at least. And you cannot build on this property unless we grant the variance. There's no question that's the case. So I'll say that about the variances. And then as far as just based on, and maybe this is the lawyer in me that I can't run away from, but I firmly believe that we don't have the ability to not grant this variance based on what I've seen and everything I've heard and all the law. That's my opinion. From both a legal standpoint, but also just personally, I don't think that's right. So, but I think you've got a good idea.
And I know it's not the way we normally do things, but maybe they've heard things that they haven't had a chance to respond to. And instead of us debating it internally, back and forth, I'd like to let him have the opportunity to do that, if that's okay. Sure. Okay.
I ask one more question to make
Sure.
one. So if it's the regulation that's the hardship, then every case before us has a hardship, right? So why do they come before us then?
That's the exceptional hardship. So like, if every case has a hardship, but the question is whether or not they can still do what they reasonably should have done with the land.
Right. But what you're saying, if that's the case, then really, if we grant this variance, and almost every variance that comes before us, we would grant because the only hardship is the regulation, and we're just going to say the regulation doesn't apply if it's your neighbor's house is the same or your neighbor's house is the same, instead of saying that because if that's the hardship, there's no reason, right?
No, and that's right, but what you're leaving out is the minimal necessary. And each time we look at it, that's what we're doing. If you look at our deliberations each time, we're talking about, especially when we ask them to defer them, which is so popular now for us to do, because what we say, okay, look, here's what we want you to do. We want you to take out a zone 1, we want you to do this, and because we're looking at that fourth characteristic, which is minimal necessary. And this is the case where they can't just pull out. So that's why that's how I would distinguish between those. But that's you.
Okay.
But I would also go back to the point that a realtor who knows this policy would not advise you to buy the lot and say that you could develop it without saying that you had to go through an extensive process to get a variance. So I think it's really two sides of the same coin. I mean, the reality is that this board has the power to grant a variance, and we make the best decision based upon the best available evidence. And I think that's what's before us.
Yeah, I mean, they signed a disclaimer that said the realtor is not an expert on land issues and multiple other issues. And so if they relied on the realtor's opinion, then they did not do their due diligence in researching the property and finding out what could or could not be done before they purchased it. And so that was beyond the regulation, beyond anything else, is they didn't do their due diligence, if that's the fact. Now, if the seller told them they could build on it, then the seller basically wasn't forthright in disclosing what could be done with the property, and so the seller has an issue there. But and again, you should not have relied on the seller's comments anyhow. You should have done your own due diligence. So they should not have bought the property.
And I think I definitely want to hear from the engineer as well, because we want to be thorough. But I think one thing that is not being said that we're all struggling with is that it feels unfair when people are regulated without being compensated. But that happens every day. You know, I have to stop at a stoplight by the law. I could much more conveniently run straight through that stoplight. It's inconvenient to stop every block at a stoplight, but I do it because it's the law, and it costs me money, it costs me time. And it's not a new concept that every behavior is not compensated.
I believe Mr. Dale wanted to know if the applicant's engineer had anything to offer to some of the points that were made.
Sure, I'll speak to some. As far as the hardship, like she stated, it's a bulletin. It's not law. It's not regulation. It's FEMA's opinion or their conception of what a hardship is. So, like Blade said, you can't cut off at the property line the hardship. It's just where the property is. So that hardship is associated with all those properties. So it is unique to that property, although it shares that uniqueness with the adjacent property. I wish we could sometimes cut life off at the property line. It would be much easier on us engineers for sure, but you can't, especially in this case. So I think the property is unique, although it does share that uniqueness with the adjacent parcels. And as far as the regulation, that regulation is the hardship on this property, along with topography. If the regulation wasn't there, we could build without the setback variance. We could even go closer to the floodway. It's not the floodway we're encroaching on, it's the buffers that was regulated by Metro post the 2010 flood. Again, understandable. They have taken measures to make it safer. We've added to those measures, and I don't think that denying us based on that regulation would be proper. Again, topography is another hardship on this property. To alleviate some of that hardship, we scooted the building, or proposing to scoot the building closer to the road, so we would stay off of the slope. It does slope as we go toward the river at a greater pace, so we're trying to alleviate some of that by the setback variance that we've been granted. As far as the realtor, we're not stating our lack of knowledge of the property as a hardship. It was just a circumstance of the case. So we're not bringing to the board our hardship is the realtor lied to us, or the property owner didn't tell us about what can't be built on, and where we can build, and what processes need to take place so we can build. That just happens to be part of where we are. So, and as far as law has been put in place so that we could take this process to where we are today. And there are minimal parameters, and we've met those parameters, and like I said, exceeded those parameters to offer safe as we can be. And I believe that we discussed, it was brought up that these lines are not defined and concrete, but these lines are where we are today based on the information that we have. 2010 flood, recent floods. So because of that, I know that it's a moving ebb and flow, that this could always be updated daily. But based on the information we have, with the modeling that we have, we've put parameters in place, Metro has, to try to offer the safest buildable area for its community, and we surpass those. So with that in mind, I believe that might be all that I can touch on. So thank you all.
Thank you.
I'm going to propose a motion. I move that we deny the proposal as presented.
It's been a motion to deny the proposal as presented. Can I hear a second?
Second.
It's been a second. All in favor of denying the motion as presented, say aye.
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 All against? Nay.
You said denying.
I'm sorry, did I say it incorrectly?
You said all those in favor of denying the motion.
Denying, I meant their proposal. Yeah, I should approval of the motion. I apologize. All those in favor of approval of the motion to deny?
Aye.
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 Okay. And then all those against? Nay. So the motion carries. The variance request has been denied.
Thank you all.
Everybody doing good? We need to take a break.
I think we need a break.
Just going to adjourn just for 5 minutes. If everybody could be back by 15 till, so it's 40 after now. 45, we'll re-adjourn. We're going to go ahead and get started again. Thank you. Because of the break, we're going to go ahead and read into the record the standard for appeal of decisions again, and then we'll hear the second matter for us.
If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Committee, you may appeal the decision by filing a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery Court or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the committee's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied.
Thank you. At this time, we will turn the floor over to staff for a summary of the variance request.
All right, next case on the agenda is 2017-00023. This is 2207 Pennington Bend. Parcel number is 06213-014600. Inspector is Kimberly Hayes, and this is in Council District 15, Jeff Syracuse. Applicant's request is the following: disturbance of the Zone 2 floodway buffer for an elevated deck or decks, and maintenance of the Zone 2 buffer, particularly mowing of the grass. Appellant is Adam Epstein. Stormwater staff comments are as follows. If approved, proposed landscape plant schedule be moved to the Zone 1 buffer demarcation line, meaning moving it closer to the Zone 1 line. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, site is Zone R15, defer to Stormwater for review. Greenways, request the applicant provide a greenway conservation easement paralleling the Cumberland River.
I'll turn the floor over to the applicant.
Hi. My name's Adam Epstein, 3704 Hobbs Road. I know it's been a long day. I'll try to keep this short, and I've got some handouts I'm going to hand out quickly to get passed around that didn't get done before to illustrate a few things. Here. Yeah. This one. Thanks. The first handout I wanted you to look at is, I know this question came up today, and it's this one about, in order to prove uniqueness of the lot, what I provided was a map of the street and an area of all the ones we had surveys for, that we could find surveys for to be accurate, was to show the distance from the floodplain, the distance from the floodway buffer, and the distance from the floodway. That as you go up the street, everyone changes. You know, everyone has a different degree of floodplain encroachment, floodway encroachment, and floodplain buffer encroachment. Now, I don't know how to describe anything more unique than that my lot's different than the guy next door because his floodway's further away from mine, and if I go down four lots, the floodway's further away from that end. That seems to be the only way you can define uniqueness. I mean, also my slope is different. I've got a higher slope because my slope's 12 feet and 58 feet, where the neighbor 2 down from me has a 3 degree slope. I'm more like a 15-degree slope. This is in, what we're trying to describe here, this is in a Zone 2, is that right?
Zone 2.
Zone 2. We're only encroaching on Zone 2, and it's for an elevated deck. What kind of happened here was we were zoned OR 20 when I bought the property, and the councilman decided to rezone the property to R15 in the middle of our permitting process. So we had a lot of confusion there, and then we got hit with pending legislation, so we couldn't do anything. So finally we're able to negotiate a way to go ahead and let us have the OR 20 setbacks in order to start building and pull a permit under R15. So somehow inadvertently the decks got left off, and I didn't know enough about floodplain buffers at the time to know that they go into the sky. I thought they were like floodplain that they stopped at a height. So now the next illustration I've got there is the original plat from 1925 that kind of shows how all the things change as the lots go down through. Each one's a different width, a different length. It's not like a uniform subdivision. So the lots have been here since 1925. The regulations have continued to creep on top of them over that time. This lot was created before Metro was Metro, and we had unified zoning or anything like that. So the structure's out of the floodplain. The structure itself is out of the floodplain too. It's out of the floodway buffer. This is just the deck. And I think it's something we've seen in the presentation today that Zone 2, you've been a little more amenable about granting variances in that. I think I've got my landscape architect here to talk about impervious area, and those kind of things that will answer to that. I talked to the fire marshal's office, and they were concerned that if I don't get this variance, I don't have a second way out of the house. I'm 12 feet off the ground. It's pretty tough in the rear to get out. And usually the fires start in the kitchen. My kitchen's in the middle of the house. The houses are already built. One's 90% complete, and the other one's 78% complete. So I'm kind of like stuck. I don't have a different thing I can do now because I just got caught. We just never show decks on site plans. Usually surveyors just don't do that because they don't affect the setbacks or anything like that with the house. So I'll turn it over to Skip and let him talk.
Thanks, Adam. My name is Skip Hebert. I'm a landscape architect with Hebert Ball Land Design, and we're requesting 3 variances today. The first of which is the floodway buffer disturbance. As Adam mentioned, the disturbance that we're creating is actually 12 feet above the ground, so therefore would not be within the area that would be in contact with water during that typical flood. So that's number one. Number 2 is the continuous mowing and maintenance of the buffer. Currently, the property has Zone 1 and Zone 2 buffer is covered with turf or with grasses, and what we're requesting is to allow us to mitigate a portion of that in Zone 1 by adding plantings, which are in the drawings that you've been provided, of native species, trees, shrubs, and grasses in that Zone 1 to mitigate the effect of removing some of the grasses. So that should provide us more pervious area or more area that is conducive to a Zone 1 buffer. Zone 2, we would request that you allow us to have that as turf, and that would be in an area that could be mowed, but as I said, the Zone 1 buffer would be planted in a heavier or a more densely native species than it is currently planted. The waiver of the buffer signage is only for Zone 2. Zone 1, we still have signs planned for the Zone 1. That area of Zone 1 is to be non-disturbed, but the Zone 2 is for the maintenance to allow the mowing within Zone 2 just to maintain that it's more of a lawn area. Thank you.
If I could add a couple other things. The house itself is built with flood vents, and we've already got a flood determination on the first house, and they're saying we don't even require flood insurance. And the second house is going to require the lowest amount of flood insurance, which is about $208 a year for $250,000 in coverage, because we use the flood vents. We're 5 feet above the known 420 floodplain on the finished floor, so we're ready for I hope, the 1,000-year flood in that regard. Thank you.
We'll move to public comments, and we'll start with anyone here to talk in opposition to the variance request. Is there anyone here that would like to talk in opposition to the variance request? The other way around last time.
Hi again. Travis Lawler, 2315 Pennington Bend Road. So I think, you know, Mr. Epstein has built 2 large homes on these 50-foot lots. They back right up to the floodway buffer. And as Mr. Lindsay said earlier, you know, a home that's just outside the limit of the buffer is at no less level of risk than the next door neighbor. He built these, obviously, knowing that he would need, well, he says he didn't know he would need a variance for the decks, but I don't know, he built them right up to the floodway buffer. So, you know, a deck is nice, but the requirement is that a failure to grant would be an exceptional hardship, and I just can't see how a deck, not having a deck is an exceptional hardship. Again, and I would also say, you know, once again, these homes are not unique. The hardship is not unique. It's the same hardship that everyone on the Bend and Miami faces. So, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the variance request? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. He's at 412 feet, the back of that building. And I don't know that the new topo maps caught that where that back wall is, and you've got a picture of it in the back, the base of that wall is at 412 feet, and there is no flood vent or anything. And my position is that he presented this. It was a little bit tricky. He was 75 feet from the floodway. There wasn't anything in the record to say, oh my gosh, that river's not going to stay in that floodway. It's not going to even stay in the buffer. It's going to pool down to 412, 414, 416, 418 to 420, which is the flood stage for there. He didn't put the balconies on there because it would be real convenient to get the houses built and then ask for the variance, so there's no scrutiny beforehand. The scrutiny's coming now that they're built. And I doubt that I have a prayer to prevent him building balconies, but I would ask that you would consider not letting him do it, but have him just put a Juliet balcony there where there's a barrier at that open door, which he's already built, planned from the get-go. I don't think he should be rewarded for tricking the review by Stormwater in the way he submitted these plans. And I also think the Juliet balcony could help prospective buyers know there's something wrong here. As y'all have said earlier today, you've got buyers that come in that don't know about flooding, don't know about Nashville's issues. This could give them a heads up. So if I don't have a prayer there, I want you to please, please don't allow him to mow and maintain that buffer. There are trees and bushes along that riverbank that will protect that property and property downstream from this flood that's going to come and inundate the backyard of these houses. He's already mowing, but don't let him cut down those bushes and trees. Please don't. Because once they're cleared, These native plants can't be replaced with equal hydraulic control structures or plants. They're gone, they're gone. And please, require him to put the buffer signs up there. There needs to be notice to everybody about this important natural flooding protection. This is an area, as I said, the base flood is 420.2. The rear wall of these houses is 412, but it is 75 feet from the floodway. The breakout vents, if you see on that rear picture, they're 1 foot from the main floor at the top of the foundation. They're none down where the water's going to come. And if you remember a fact about the levees failing in New Orleans during Katrina, those floodwaters first flowed in and against the levees, and then they washed under them, and they dug, and they dug, and they dug. And that's going to be the same in this area. Those eddies and whirlpools are going to come in. They're going to be moving so strongly, but the floodway, the channel is going to be moving more swiftly, and that water can't get back into it. So it's going to sit there and dig, just like a drill. I'm doing my best to give you really solid, well-founded reasons to protect people who don't understand this flooding from moving into that street. I think that that's your duty, to not only protect those people, but to protect the first responders who have to go in and rescue them. And just take a moment, and if you remember, earlier this year, there was a police officer named Eric Mumau who was in this very area trying to save a woman in her car. And I have understood that Mr. Mumau was a very strong swimmer, and he was swept away and drowned. His body was found less than 60 yards from where he went in to the Cumberland. It's a really, really dangerous place. And when he went in, it wasn't at flood stage. It was at normal pool. And you have to remember the normal pool is maintained because that is a channel for barges. So it has to stay at a certain depth to allow that transportation sector. And Old Hickory was not built as a flood control structure. The Corps didn't build it as that. It's for channel travel, for the business that goes up and down there. So I hope that you will limit this man's requests, give notice by limiting him to the Juliet balconies, hopefully, but certainly don't allow him to mow, and don't give him a waiver on his buffer signage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Again, state your name and address, please, before we start.
I'm Richard Lawler, 2313 Pennington Bend. I'd just like to note that Mr. Epstein conveniently forgot to let you know that he wanted decks at the back of the property. He has now said the fire marshal wants him to have an exit back there. I think he could have a fire escape back there. Decks are not necessary. And I think it was a little devious on his part to wait till now to ask for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
My name is James Nichols, 2315 Pennington Bend. I'll be really brief, just say, speaking in opposition. And when we had to rebuild from the 2010 flood, the codes officials were really clear about tearing out what we had built to bring it to code and put it back in. It was a financial hardship. We didn't get a variance for putting things in wrong. We put it back in correct. I understand the request today is, well, we already built it wrong. We should basically forge ahead. We didn't get that convenience in 2010. I don't think it's policy, but I'd like you to consider that in opposition.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the variance request? Seeing none, I failed to ask if anyone wanted to speak in support of the variance request. I apologize for reversing that order. Please come up. State your name and state your name and address, please. Start off.
My name's Mary O'Neill. I live at 2219 Pennington Bend Road and have been there 2.5 years. And I've been very friendly with all the neighbors. This has caused a little rift, but no one came and told me the dangers. I feel like, oh my God, I'm like, might die this week by living there, but no one ever told me the dangers. I just thought, I want to live on this pretty river, so I am. And I want to address a couple things. One is into the character of Mr. Epstein, who I have known for a long time. And I think I actually suggested to him that he buy these, I know that I suggested he buy these properties because he had been to my house and seen how lovely it is. I, along with every single person that has spoken, has a deck on their house. And a deck allows us to look to the river. This has gotten so personal, it's like if he says the sky is blue, one side of this room is going to say, no, it's not. I don't know why it's gotten so personal. A deck is not going to cause harm to the flooding. A few posts are not going to change it. You might have to rebuild your deck. You have to rebuild your deck from time to time anyway. They're not, as permanent as a house. As far as mowing, I don't know how many of y'all like mosquitoes and other flying bugs. I haven't met anybody yet that does. So everybody else here mows their yard if they have a backyard. I think that's just absurd. Now, as far as taking the trees out and some of the native trees, again, hackberries are native trees. I have no use for them. As long as you're taking out the foliage and putting something back in, it will hold it up. I think this is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think this is about ridiculous. And I wish that people would compromise just a little bit, give this guy a chance. I don't want that street developed. I really don't. At the same time, I can't stop this train called Nashville that's building everywhere. So as long as it's going to be built, why not have some nice homes, single-family homes on a lot, decent houses, and welcome some of the neighbors and share in this treasure of living on the river. Thank you. I think I'm the only one. I tried to cover it all. It's my turn.
Excuse me, sir.
It's my turn, Richard.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in support? Yes, please come up.
My name is Pam Adams. My husband Tony and I have had property down there long before the flood. We love that area. We have 2 properties, in fact, and have really added to the neighborhood by taking a snake-ridden dump and made it really nice. And I think anybody that has driven by there can see that it's beautiful now where we are than it used to be. I was told that if I got up and spoke that there would be a complaint against the trees that we had cut. I will tell you that I'm going to speak anyway. We got permission from the Corps because we had a lot of diseased trees falling into the river. We are planting new trees, and there was a complaint filed against us. We know they drove down the river, and Mrs. May, and took the pictures, and I'm not going to succumb to that threat. I'm going to talk about it. So you can check with the Corps of Engineers and see that we did everything the way it should be. We don't need diseased trees falling into the river. So that's the first thing I wanted to let you know. The other thing is we made it through that flood, and I still get emotional about it. I am honored to live in a town that reaches out and helps each other through the flood. It's not a private road. And evidently, since we denied selling it, Mr. Lawler has sent letter after letter to my mother trying to buy that property. He didn't know that it was our family property. And when he found out that he couldn't buy it, all of a sudden, there's an association, and that may have been there long ago, but we had never heard of it. So I know there's neighbors that are not opposed to people bringing nice homes to the neighborhood. We appreciate what Mr. Epstein's done. Our property is next door, and next to that, we're proud of what he's done to the neighborhood. There's beautiful homes there now. He's been excellent to work with as a neighbor, very cooperative, very good, and we're thrilled that he is cutting the weeds that have been there since 2003. We have fought snakes and bugs because the weeds were 6 foot tall, and there was even an open septic tank that I called the property owner and the city and let them know that somebody's going to get hurt with that. Whether it's a dog or a child, an open septic tank is not safe, and the bugs and the snakes have been horrific. Thank you to Mr. Epstein for making that a nice place to be. And yes, I do think that those weeds should not be offensive to anybody, and we should take care of our properties. And I'm sure some of the other neighbors don't let their grass grow 6 foot tall and fight snakes and weeds and bugs. That's miserable to have for a neighbor. So not everyone in the neighborhood is in agreement with that. There's a lot of people that don't show up for the meetings, that have been campaigned to show up for meetings and fight any progress there is. We just happen to be realtors also that will take the time and show up. We're not there to harm anybody. We're there to hopefully improve neighborhoods. And I think anybody that lives there can tell you we have improved that neighborhood. And we love the view of the river. It's beautiful. The decks that Mr. Epstein's proposing are taller than our our roof. I can't see that a flood would ever hit that. You know, there's a beautiful view, and what a shame not to be able to enjoy that. I guess that's pretty much it. I'm not a public speaker, but I will stand up for what's right, and I won't be told not to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to speak in support of the variance? Yes, sir.
My name's Kenneth Keisinger, 1510 Cahal Avenue, Nashville. Big picture is that the future owners of this house will want and need a secondary means of egress, and I think that's, you guys talk a lot about safety, and I think that's the primary issue here. I think that you should approve his motion to build those decks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else here to speak in support of the variance request? Was there anyone else? That said, we'll close in support. Mr. Lawler, was there something that you wanted to respond to? Well, you were certainly welcome to. Normally, we do support first and opposition second.
Property. We have never made an offer on that property. The property is vacant. I don't know where she gets all this.
If we could keep it to the variance request that's up.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was trying to correct the misapprehension. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Ms. May again with Ms. Adams. These were pushed down in the fall. They were live trees. They cut a lot of trees. They put them on the street.
Ma'am, if I could, if it relates to the variance request that we're talking about now, then we'll be glad to hear it. But if it doesn't.
And not rebuttal for the
yes,
people that spoke. So sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, not seeing any more voices in support or opposition.
Just a question.
Yeah.
The applicant. What is the finished floor elevation of the house in respect to the floodplain?
The finished floor elevation of the house is 425. The flood plain is 420. So we're 5 feet above the known floodplain.
So the bottom of the deck would be how high above the flood elevation?
About 12 to 14 feet. It varies, 12 feet.
Above the flood?
Above the flood, yeah.
All right.
No, not above the flood.
No.
It's 5 feet above the flood.
No.
It's 5 feet above the flood.
5 feet above.
5 feet above the flood.
5 feet
I
above
said
the
it's like
flood
4
elevation.
feet above.
Yeah.
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 Yes. So.
And the basement's uninhabitable. I mean, it's not a basement, it's a crawl space, and we do have the approved flood vents.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't have to do flood insurance on one of them because of that.
Well, I have an observation. I mean, I think there are plenty of houses built in Davidson County that are on slopes that have a garage and a front door, but don't necessarily have an access from the balcony in the back. So I'm not sure that that's a fire marshal requirement. If you were to remove the stairwell and then you're just spanning out over the floodway, I don't have as much of a problem. So, I mean, did the fire marshal really say that, or?
Yeah, fire marshal.
I mean, I doubt it, Adam. I mean, I think that, like I said, there's plenty of sloped lots that have balconies on the second level that don't have access from that balcony. They just span out. And so you do have, I assume you have 2 points of access in the house, probably one through the garage and one through the front door. And I don't know if this basement level that extends down, is that finished at all? I mean, it's just an extended foundation wall, right? Okay, so I mean, it'd be a lot easier for me, I think, if you were just spanning, and we've allowed structures to expand over the floodway. Yeah, cantilevers. And so, I mean, if you were making that request, I think it makes our job a lot easier.
Okay.
And so I think that I think I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of a cantilevered structure without an extended stairwell down to existing grade, and that the mitigation that's proposed by the Skip is adequate to offset any impacts in the buffer. If I need to go through our four-point checklist, I don't see a problem. I think it's justified to want to enjoy the river. Everybody that's here, and this is my former council district, I know these constituents very well, and they all enjoy the river, and there's a lot of benefit to that. And so having the house, having that view, I think is really important, and I think there's some healthy reasons why you should allow that. And we've in the past allowed these types of overhangs, and based upon that, I would make that recommendation, that motion to approve without the stairwell. How big of an area are we talking about mowing? The entire buffer? I mean,
No. Just the first 25
Just the
feet.
Zone 2.
Zone
The
two.
Zone 1 signs would stay in place.
Okay.
That no disturbance would
and
take
the
place.
existing, all this vegetation that they're talking about, is it within this 25 feet now? No?
The existing vegetation currently is grasses and
Okay.
and just scrub, and that's the.
Are we
that's-
removing any trees in Zone 2?
No.
Okay, so then I would add to my motion that you be allowed to mow the 25-foot buffer. Does that cover it? Okay.
Roy? Yeah, you negated staff's recommendation that they move the mitigation closer.
Okay, and include the staff's comment that mitigation be moved closer towards the front of the lot, away from the Zone 1 buffer. Is that correct?
Closer to the Zone 1, right at the Zone 1 buffer
But, I
line.
mean-
Right behind the buffer signage.
Right, okay. Adding staff's comments with regards to a relocation of the mitigation.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? All right, there's been a motion to approve as requested, with the exception that there's no stair down off the decks in the back. Is there any restriction on the size of the cantilever?
As shown on his plan.
Okay.
You said cantilever.
Well.
Okay, so, but this does have, I think it has posts, correct?
Oh, I thought I heard in
Yeah,
your
no.
motion that you wanted that you would accept the cantilever.
Well, I will accept cantilever. Obviously, I'm not necessarily requiring it. I'm not sure that's, I don't know how, I'm not a structural engineer, so I don't know how difficult that would be. So, pardon? Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with the post, extending underneath the balconies themselves. I just don't want to see a stairwell coming down.
Okay, so I misunderstood. So the motion, and there's been a second.
I may have said cantilever. I'm sorry if I said that.
No, it may have been me. There's been a motion and a second for.
And can I add a correction, just so it doesn't go into the record wrong. You are allowed to mow and maintain the Zone 2 buffer anyway, so that doesn't probably need to be something that we grant.
All right, awesome.
Well, that's helpful. You'd think we should know that.
Okay.
So there's been a motion and a second to grant the variance as requested with the exception that there not be a stairwell down into the Zone 2, and also with the exception that the staff's recommendations on moving the planting in closer. So it's up for a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee.
Okay. So we got about 2 minutes to hear the next two. If the next applicant come up, that'd be great.
I think there's three slain. Yeah. A lot of that public comment.
Hey, Adam.
Let's just come and see.
All right, everybody, Steve Mishu, Metro Water Development Services for case number 3. It's 2017-00020, Plantation View. It's at 6949 Highway 70 and 6957 Highway 70. The map parcels are 143 Parcel 11 and 143 Parcel 30. Its inspector is Mr. Ken Tranter, and it's in Council District number 34 for Ms. Angie Henderson. The applicant's request is to allow a stream buffer disturbance for a sidewalk, to allow a stream buffer disturbance for a driveway alignment, to allow a stream buffer disturbance for a head wall in the Zone 2 buffer, and for a water quality calculation limit variance. The applicant is Matt Smith with Harding Smith, being represented by Gresham Smith. There is no stormwater comments. Comments were not provided by codes. There's no comments there. Planning, the variance request, they say it's consistent with their final SP application. And Greenways request the applicant provide a greenway conservation easement along the property frontage and Flat Creek. Greenway does not support channelization of the creek. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and we will turn the floor over to the applicant.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, and to the members of the committee, thank you for letting us be here today and for your thoroughness and patience with the cases that you hear. I know it's a difficult job. I do appreciate that. I want to give a little bit of history to this property, just to put things in context. I'm going to talk about zoning just very, very briefly, and understand that we're not asking the committee to comment on zoning issues, but again, this is for context of how we are at the point that we're at and making this appeal ask. So this development project dates back more than 10 years. We went through, as Steve mentioned, a preliminary SP, specific plan rezone that was granted through the Planning Commission and Council process for 35 units, more or less in the configuration that you see today. We went through the second phase of that and actually got our final SP approval back in 2007. And as a part of that process, ended up going all the way through the grading permit process, had our grading permit granted. Almost started construction on the property by Harding Smith. They've owned this property for, well, before then. And then this thing known as the recession came along, and a lot of the construction and growth really slowed down in Nashville. Our grading permit expired during that time period, and also during that time period from 2007 to presently, there were several fairly significant changes in stormwater management ordinance. some changes in the buffer, and most particularly some changes as it relates to LID and green infrastructure practices. We're not here today asking to go back to the original design. We've made what we feel is a good faith effort to maintain what was entitled by the original preliminary SP, in more or less the same configurations, and completely redesign the project to, as best we could, accommodate those 35 units that were granted in the context of the new stormwater management ordinance by providing green infrastructure practices, by respecting the stream buffer as much as practical. And so what we're here today is to ask for some of these, I think, fairly minor variances that will allow us to, for example, cross the stream buffer not exactly at a perpendicular so that we can line up with the driveway across the street as requested by Public Works, for some very, very minor encroachments, putting some water quality provisions in one of the Zone 1 buffers. And I think it's also worth adding that this property is much bigger than what you're seeing represented on this portion of the site plan. There's a significant amount of property to the back. We do intend on maintaining that property in its natural state in perpetuity, either through granting of a conservation easement or potentially sale of that property. That's to a public entity. That's yet to be determined, but through one of those vehicles, we'll maintain that. That property to the back is essentially undevelopable due to the slopes, due to the slippage soils that we see in the Bellevue area. So, again, I feel like we've made a good faith effort to redesign the project, fitting within the context of the new ordinance, and still maintain the entitlements and the intent of the original preliminary SP. And with that, be happy to answer any questions you might have. Or Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone here to speak in support of this variance request? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the variance request? Shucks. All right, let's move it over to the committee.
I got a question. All the green, that's your mitigation? Okay. And that's all new?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, above and beyond what is required by landscape ordinance.
That's obvious and self-evident. Okay, staff, are we okay with, I mean, the development's already started on the site, right? No, that was before the recession. Okay.
All that started before, let me clarify that, was installation of the initial erosion controls.
Okay.
Development never really started.
Okay. So can somebody help me understand the issue of channelization that was raised, and how do we feel about having a bridge crossing here, given that we have an ordinance or regulation about numbers of density of bridge crossings?
So I'm not really sure where that comment come from. I'll let Mr. Stephen Brown correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they're really rip-wrapping necessarily the channel. I think what they're planning on doing is accessing the rest of their property from Highway 70 just to get to the other side so they could do their development. A lot of cases like this will not even come before the committee because we have an approved or permissible buffer disturbances. If their only request was to just cross it perpendicular, we would just handle it at staff level. Because of the sidewalk and the slight skew, I think that's what really triggered it to come over here.
You're correct, Steve. We're not proposing any channelization per se here. We are proposing a new bridge crossing, and related to that, the existing bridge does not show on that plan, but there is an existing small bridge crossing. There used to be a house on this property. You can see the driveway in the aerial photo. At the end of construction, that old crossing would be removed, so we're kind of trading one crossing for a new crossing.
Okay. I'm going to move for approval with the following conditions. The granting of the greenway easement or sale, however you choose to do it. I don't think it matters which one. The sale of the access? You mentioned maybe to a public entity.
That specifically was the property to the rear. That's not, it's a different issue from the greenway.
Okay. All right.
So that would be maybe better to say the property to the south, the undeveloped portion of.
So those are two separate.
Two separate issues, yes.
Okay. And were there any other staff conditions that you all wanted? Okay.
It's been a motion, as stated by Mr. Galbraith. Can we get a second for that motion?
I'll second.
We've got a second. We've got a motion and a second. Unless someone would like to open up discussions, let's get a vote then. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed to the motion, say nay. Seeing none opposed, the motion passes.
When you do your homework, it's easier.
We try.
If you go at the end of a meeting that's 3 hours long, it's easier.
That's a second motivation.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We've got the next.
We're still up.
Oh, hence the confusion.
Okay, so number 4 is 2017-00021. It's Hillsborough High School renovation at 3812 Hillsborough Pike. Parcel number is 11715, parcel 37. The inspector is also Mr. Kenneth Tranter, and it's Council District number 25, Councilman Pulley. The applicant's request is to allow a stream buffer disturbance, including a corrugated metal pipe, a reduced permanent buffer width as shown on the plan of record, a modified buffer signage, and continuous mowing and maintenance. The appellant is Mr. David Profit with Metro Public Schools, being represented by Gresham Smith and Associates, or Gresham Smith and Partners. Stormwater staff comments. The applicant has worked with staff to develop an alternative location for stream relocation. Codes provided no comment. Planning deferred to stormwater staff. Greenways deferred to stormwater staff. I do believe this one came before you as a preliminary. So this is pretty much in line with the preliminary. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hand the floor to the applicant.
Okay.
And I would comment that to the extent this is exactly like the preliminary, make that comment, and then maybe a brief summary. I guess, Carrie, you weren't on the. Carrie wasn't here, so you do have one new board member.
Okay. We'll try to make this brief. Very unusual situation here where we've got essentially what amounts to a man-made aquatic resource that's a very small isolated pocket located inside of the limits of the campus. And by very small, I mean we've got a pool that's about 6 feet in diameter and so deep. And because of the development constraints of the property and trying to fit a 1,600 student campus owned to 28 acres in Green Hills, that's a lot of stuff to pack in the property. What we're asking to do is to reconstruct this aquatic resource in another location very, very close by, and that's what's represented on the plan here. We did come before this board again and ask for a preliminary approval, and we're granted that preliminary. Now we're back here today with our final plans. I do want to address one very, I think, kind of slight modification from one of the comments that we received on the preliminary, and that was about the buffer signage. Subsequent to the preliminary, we've been approached by the Cumberland River Compact, who has offered to put some grant money in that they have and partner with the design team and partner with the school on development of that educational signage. And the idea is we're gonna engage students at the school to help come up with that signage, and we would ask that you allow us to continue to work with staff and don't have a final sign designed for you here today, but we feel like this is a good outcome to be able to engage that organization and be able to engage the students at the school and have a meaningful part in the development of this and the establishment of a reconstructed aquatic resource.
Thank you. Is anyone here to speak in support of the variance request? Seeing none, anyone here to speak in opposition to the variance request? Seeing none, let's open up for committee discussion, motions, etc.
Mr. Slade, I remember a request that you made of them about something regarding crossing a certain area. I don't know if you remember that or not. I haven't heard, since there weren't any changes from the original, I'm wondering if that's still a concern. But
I don't have that concern sitting here today.
And I don't.
Thank you for bringing it up.
You take care of me, I'll take care of you.
Given the mitigation that's going to take place, I would make a motion that we approve this variance request as requested.
I second.
There's been a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Unless someone else wants to open up any more discussion, then we'll vote on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Seeing no opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I would guarantee that.
I can't do much about that.
Yeah, I know.
Were you gentlemen here when we read the opening statement on writ of certiorari on appeals? Okay, then we need to read it again. If we could read that in the record, please, Secretary.
If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Committee, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the committee's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied.
Thank you. With that, I'll hand it over to staff for a summary.
Thank you, sir. Steve Mishu again. This is case number 5, 2017-00022, is the Dry Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant at 61 Edenwold Road. Parcel number is 3411, parcel 24. Inspector Ken Tranter, or it could be Boots. This is in Council District Number 10, Councilman Doug Perdue. The applicant requests the disturbance of the Zone 2 buffer of Dry Creek for the construction of a portion of a driveway and a parking area, and the disturbance of a placement of a stormwater BMP in the buffer. That's head wall, and that's a rip wrap. The appellant is Metro Water Services, being represented by LDA Engineering. Staff comments, staff requests that if a variance is approved, that the applicant varies the native tree plantings so that one species does not comprise more than 20% of the total. There's no comments from codes. Planning deferred to stormwater, and greenways also deferred to stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Open the floor to the applicant.
My name is John Barnett. I'm a project manager at Metro Water Services. This project is at our Dry Creek wastewater facility. It's one of our 3 facilities that we have for treating wastewater. Basically, we're upgrading our chlorine disinfection area to include UV disinfection. It's a safer alternative to the chlorine gas that we have on site. So in order to access the location where the UV building would be placed, we would need to encroach upon the flood area. Mr. Drummer will tell you a little bit more about
the area now is.
Your mic's not on.
The area now beside the chlorine tanks, sort of seeing the photograph there. It's not the round ones. It's the rectangular tank. There is an existing gravel drive from the asphalt parking up to that area for maintenance activities now, which basically is mowing. The new UV facility will be placed over the top of the very end of that tank, actually be a covered building and will require more vehicular traffic. That's the reason for the upgrade of the gravel drive to asphalt and just a very small parking area, basically just enough room for a vehicle to turn around and get out of there. Okay, there we go. The zone, that's an encroachment on the outer zone, Zone 2. The Zone 1 area is basically most all of it is inside the fence, security fence of the plant, and is currently mowed grass. So what we are asking for a variance on is to place the asphalt for the drive and the parking lot, and also to allow us to place, we have to do stormwater mitigation with the bioretention area and a detention pond that results in the other request for the head wall. And you can see that down on there. There it is. So that's actually none of the other facilities there. The bioretention or the detention is in the buffer. It's just the head wall outlet and a little bit of riprap there.
Anyone here to speak in opposite or in support of the variance request? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the variance request? Seeing none, I'll open it up to the committee discussion.
So maybe just a point of clarification. So the variance request form actually says disturbance of Zone 1 and 2.
Yes. I guess the permanent or the permanent disturbance would be for the asphalt. There will be some grading on further into the green area. You can see just south of the parking area. We will be doing some grading there just for construction. That will be put back in grass as it is now.
Okay.
Ma'am, if you look at your package, it will be a very, very small little section that's highlighted pink.
Okay, that's what I was.
That's the Zone 1 disturbance.
Okay. Thank you.
Very, very small. You can't even see it there.
So the pavement would be basically mostly over currently mowed surfaces.
Gravel and currently mowed, correct.
All right. I'm going to move for approval with staff conditions as read into the record.
Second that motion.
Been a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Moving on, I think it's all that's left is new business. One point I want to make, and Secretary, and I guess there is a procedure on our website that states forth what we're going to do in each of these meetings. For example, it says we're going to limit like each person to 3 minutes. There's a lot of stuff on there that we don't do. In fact, I've never seen it before. And so
Sorry, a lot of other boards and conditions that frequently have like a lot of contentious issues and speakers who are kind of long-winded do that, do limit it to 2 or 3 minutes.
And it could be that we want to do that, but one thing I want to make sure is the case is that whatever is up there is what we're following. And so if we could bring a copy of that so that we can discuss it, hopefully there's a meeting soon that's not as long and we can at least agree that, yeah, let's do this. I personally don't like cutting people off if they want to talk, and obviously these issues are very close to the heart for some, as we saw today. But that said, if we do want to put limitations on it, then we need to stick to them, I think. So,
Chairman, I will tell you, Planning Commission, they have like their standard is a 2-minute discussion, and they actually have a clock. I think it's reset by somebody up front, and after that 2 minutes is over, I mean, there is a beeping noise that just doesn't stop.
and if we want,
Transportation Licensing Commission has something like that, and maybe traffic and parking as well.
if we want to follow that, I mean, I'm fine with that, but I want us to make that decision. I mean, I certainly, from being a moot court board and all sorts of things, I know how to keep speakers to their time if I have to do that. But if we don't want to do that, then let's take that description down from the site is what I'm saying.
Penny, how many cases do we have for next month? Potential cases?
3 or 4.
3 or 4, okay. So we'll plan, Mr. Chair, to bring it for you.
And maybe we have it ready, and if it's too long of a meeting, then we move it to the next. So, did you want to say something, Don?
Yeah, I was going to say that, there's kind of two modes of thought. When you let people vent, they're less likely to do something back there in the back that's more problematic. But at the same time, if we give them a reasonable amount of time, maybe 4 minutes tops, we'll be a minute over what much busier commissions normally allow. And it will encourage them to focus more on the facts of the case and not so much on their interpersonal relationships. But that's just my observations.
All right, let's finish up with just thanking the board for getting through this pretty difficult issue again today. That said, I can hear a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All right, can I hear a second? Second. Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. Motion carries.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.